so nervous.
I'm not nervous, man. I'm feeling great.
It's a joke. It was a joke. You're looking at your computer. See, I'm lucky. I have it on my phone, and I know when we go live, and I can see some of the comments, and I can see some of the super chats, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, while everyone floods in from being sucked away from the Oscars.
Oh yeah. It's a total waste of everyone's time.
It is. I'm going to turn my volume down here. A waste. I don't think I've seen one movie this year, unless Megamind is running for an Oscar this year for some strange reason.
No, probably not.
All right. And now this is great because it's a very, it'll be an informal, what is this word? A live stream. So I can bring up as many comments as we want now.
That's right.
To legal. I've been saying it for a while, in fact, but the problem is the world is a politicized world and people get angry at what they perceive to be politicized law stuff.
I mean, I'm sub to legal. I mean, I watch his stuff and I don't really mind anyone who watches legal stuff. You should watch different people. So that's fine.
I just watched, and we'll probably get into it today. I want to say Jared Leto, but it's Steve Leto's or Leto. His video on Nancy Pelosi where he broke down that alleged law that she might have broken. It's a good video.
I kind of agreed with his opinion. Kind of the ultimate, like, we don't really care either way. But it's like, it's so petty. Why bother? But yeah.
100%. Now, incidentally, so we're 1 minute and 40 seconds in. The first 5 minutes we chatter just so that everybody can get the notification. Everyone can tweet out the link. Get people to come in because YouTube is somewhat slow these days. So we will do that. Standard rules as always. Nothing in this video, vlog, live stream is going to be legal advice. Deemed to be legal advice, misconstrued as legal advice, no legal advice. We'll get to the super chats as they come up, hopefully without interrupting the discourse to the extent that it's not able to be interrupted to address the question. All questions are welcome. All issues and queries are welcome. For those of you who don't know Uncivil Law, this is the first live stream.
Yes, just the two of us.
Just the two of
us. You and I.
We've done one. We did one with Leonard French and Nate Brody. Was sort of an impromptu live stream. It was interesting.
That was interesting.
And what else? That's it. So
we did one with the three of us.
We did one with three of us, which was Nate Brody,
Nate, you and me.
Yep. And tonight it's just me and Uncivil because Nate is watching the Oscars, and I say this without judgment, but some people. Look, I used to watch the Oscars with my parents, and in full awareness, I got a call from my mother this morning saying they couldn't come over for the Oscar party because my dad has a cold, and I didn't realize that the Oscars were today, and I said, "Oh, okay, well that's good," because I didn't realize today was the day, but today's the day.
Yeah, I don't begin to care. Would you like me just to spoil the entire Oscars in terms of like the speeches? We're gonna have a lot of speeches about how it's a horrible thing, that there's not enough faces of diversity, and some Trump stuff, and that's your evening. So I've told you the whole deal now.
Well, so apparently I haven't watched it, but I just saw on it was Fox News, I believe, and others that were reporting that Brad Pitt won an Oscar, and in his speech said they've given me 45 seconds, which is more time than Bolton had to testify before the Senate.
Yeah, so we started off right away.
It started off right away, and it sort of confirms exactly why. It's not a question of like what you believe in partisanry. It's just a question of like, I've done enough research into this that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable taking that type of hardline position. And I don't know what, maybe Brad Pitt has done more research than all of us, but I can sort of detect what's wrong with Brad Pitt's statement already without having to go much further into it.
It might be me. Maybe I missed them, but I haven't seen a lot of speeches at the Grammys, Tony Oscars, or any Academy Awards for pro-Trump people. I haven't seen a lot of pro-Trump speeches at these award shows. Maybe I just missed them all these times.
No, I don't think you missed it. Who's hosting the Oscars tonight?
Is anyone know who's hosting it?
I'm going to ask my wife in the background. Marion? Nobody knows. I don't think that. Oh, no, Ricky Gervais hosted the other thing. Okay, never mind.
Wasn't the Oscars that couldn't find anybody?
Well, that's the one. Which one was it with Kevin Hart? Was that last year or this year that Kevin Hart got?
That was still last year. I don't think they have anybody. It might be hostless.
Okay, if anybody knows who's hosting the Oscars, let us know in the comment section. And so these are the questions. The topics for the evening. The first one is the bail reform law in New York. It fits well with everything that's been going on in the news, with my last vlog on PolitiFact, and the last vlog also on bail laws in general. There's a number of issues. There's the legal, there's the human, the philosophical. It's an interesting discussion. What else can we talk about? We're going to talk about possibly that we're going to touch on Nancy Pelosi, whether or not she broke the law by tearing the State of the Union address speech that she had in her possession. One thing we could talk about, we'll see if we get there, is the difference between the healthcare system in Canada and the US, because it's been in the news lately with the election coming up and a lot of Bernie Sanders tweets, and it's an interesting, nuanced discussion that not necessarily everybody fully appreciates. But so that's it. Okay, we're 5 minutes in. Let's get started. First of all, Kurt, Uncivil Law. Tell everybody who you are.
Yes, my name is Kurt Mueller. I am a patent lawyer. I deal with intellectual property issues for inventions, and my specialty deals with databases. And of course, I have my own law channel where I release videos usually 6 days a week. On Sundays, I record, and I love all this stuff. I did like 4.5 hours on my own earlier today doing my batch recording, and I do live streams other times, and I'm just happy to be talking about this stuff because I find it fascinating.
All right, now you did say your last name was Mueller. How do you spell the Mueller? Like
the same way Mueller does. Mueller.
Okay,
and same way Robert Mueller does.
Yeah, and I said I don't care that everyone pronounces it Robert Mueller. It's Mueller in the same way it's Bueller, and there's an E in there for a reason. And from what I understand, Mueller is the correct pronunciation, and Mueller is not.
Yes, it's because of Müller, because of the umlaut. So in the German they put the umlaut over the U. It's Müller. And then when the Germans established this late 90s, I want to say, in an English translation, the correct translation is UE. So that's the correct spelling. And then Mueller is the closest pronunciation in English to the German. So yes, my pronunciation is more right than Robert Mueller's, even though it's spelled the same, but we pronounce it differently.
Okay, now so let's.
That was more about how to pronounce my name and everyone's name than anyone ever wanted to know. Ever.
Well, first of all, it's good. Everybody knows. I believe it's Mueller, and that's exactly how it's spelled with the umlaut. And my last name, incidentally, for those who don't know, is Freiheit, which means freedom in German.
Awesome.
Yep, and it's literally verbatim freedom. Apparently, in Berlin, there's a Freiheit Street, which is like sort of the red light district of Berlin, but that's what I've been told.
I don't know what my last name means, but I do know my first name is derivative from Conrad, which means wise counselor. So that worked out well for me. Oh,
now we're gonna have to see what Mueller means in German. Okay, so let's start with the bail reform laws in New York. And for anybody who doesn't know what's going on, Kurt, you want to give it the summary?
Yeah. So long story short, New York State had a law passed by the legislature in Albany that went into effect January 1st of this year. And in short, what it does is it makes most nonviolent crimes no longer eligible for cash bail. So, and you can't hold them anymore. So basically, unless it's a violent crime, violent felony, I believe in the statute, and there's more delineations actually in the statute. I'll give you some of those that are now not available for bail. Using a child to commit controlled substance crime, in other words, drug distribution. So if you're using a child in your drug distribution scheme, that does not qualify for bail anymore. Criminal sale of those controlled substances in or near a school. As you may or may not know, Viva, most states and jurisdictions consider drug sales near schools to be worse than other drug sales. They usually like double the penalty it would normally apply. So that is no longer eligible. Third degree assaults, reckless assault, menacing, and so
Stop
forth.
There for 1 second. Let's get into this slowly.
Too much?
Actually. So first of all, if anyone's asking what we are respectively drinking here, I've got the Bulight for the Freiheit, and Kurt is drinking something which is more local, Jack Daniels. This is the beauty of the late night streams. Is the kids are in bed. My wife is doing I see her doing some research on her computer now. And this allows we can break out the whiskey or the bourbon. Not eligible for parole. Not eligible for bail. That means
it means to be released on your own recognizance. So I'll make it easier. It means all these things are released on your own reconnaissance because they can, unless you can show that they're a particular danger to the victim, not society at large, but the victim, or you can show they won't come to court. So the only thing that the courts in New York can consider, because unlike many states, New York State cannot consider general threat to the public. This is a New York thing. New York law is a little weird sometimes.
That is the other term for that. Sorry to cut you off. Potential dangerousness is the other generally accepted term. It's New York, from what I understand, and I believe California.
No, I think it's a southern state. I think it's Louisiana or something like that that has that rule. Yeah, which sounds right because I think it's in their constitution because Louisiana has everything in their constitution because it's just written that way. It's like 200 pages or something ridiculous.
Louisiana, not to get into too much of a sidetrack of law, but Louisiana is a codified civil law type state, right?
Yes.
So,
which I know nothing about. But that's okay.
Well, no, that's the only reason I know that is because we're from Quebec, which is a civil law province where we have our codified laws as opposed to common laws, which would explain why they might have a longer constitution than the other states. So, New York no longer, it does not, and it has
never did.
Potential dangerousness never.
No.
Okay.
No. So they only considered whether or not you show up to court and your danger to the particular victim or your threat to the witnesses of that crime. So or interference with the investigation. So basically, your chances of interfering with the crime investigation that you're being charged with, and whether you show up to court, but not danger as a whole. So yeah, that's the normal thing.
Okay. So first of all, you guys have to do a shot every time Trump or impeachment gets mentioned.
I'll do a shot for super chats.
Yeah, I only have 3/4 of a bottle left, so I can't do that. What currency is SEK? Okay, so first of all,
Swedish krona. Swedish krona.
Swedish krona. That sounds very reasonable. Viva Frei, did you see the blind man that got smashed to the ground by police security and got a swollen brain in his climb? Having a camera and running in a public space. At least blind justice on YouTube. Where was I have not heard about that, but it doesn't surprise me. I just, what jurisdiction, what city, where was it?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, there's bunches of case law that says that people have the right to film in public, but nevertheless, every once in a while, someone gets really upset about it, and it wouldn't surprise me if it happened. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the super chat. That's no, I mean it happens, and then the question is, how was the person recording? What was the dynamic leading up to the recording? Because it's always devil's in the details. Okay, so they've reformed bail so that none of these new infractions are any longer eligible for bail, which means
so it means that you have
to consider it.
Yes, that's correct. So you have to be released on your own reconnaissance, which ROR it's sometimes called. So you're released just please come to court, and with nothing holding you there. So there's no bond. This is the very technical difference between bail and bond that no one remembers, and it's so pedantic. But technically, everyone who is not held is on bail. If there's money involved, it's called bond. So if you're not in jail at that moment, you have been bailed. If you have paid money, it's bond. That's why they call them bail bondsmen. But it's a very pedantic difference.
Okay, so but when you're out on your own reconnaissance and there's no money bail deposited in court, the court can nonetheless apply other conditions for these crimes that are no longer eligible for bail?
Well, I think that they can in some situations use ankle monitors, but I think in other situations they're not even allowed to do that. But that is another remedy. But that hasn't been fully successful. There's a case where the judge tried to hold the guy over on cash bail. He said, "You're such a threat. I want to hold you over." The upper judge, I don't think it was on appeal. I think it was like the chief judge of the district court, because they split up that way. I think it was like the chief judge of the district court basically said, "Yeah, you can't do that, and you have to let him go." And so they put an ankle monitor him, and 2 days later he cut it off. So there was that. So that happened.
Okay, so and now I stopped you when you were listing some of the new crimes that are not eligible for bail. What was the third one? Because it involved the term manslaughter, I believe.
Third degree assault. Third degree assault.
Yeah. What's third degree assault?
Oh, geez, I'd have to look up New York specific law on this because it doesn't have a uniform definition. So that's asking too much, Viva, because it's
Okay.
like it does. I don't know.
But now, so the question that I'm asking myself, because this is the commentary that I got on my, overview of the subject. It's nice and it's humane and it's sympathetic to the delays in the court system, inherent rights to individuals and the accused, but that there was a bait and switch going on with the state, what they're telling you versus what the actual state of the law is, where publicly they reassure everybody, don't worry, this is only for 90% of the crimes that are nonviolent, etc. And then you find out what sort of crimes are now dispensed of bail, and most people would probably think of those as violent crimes. For example, using a child to deal drugs. I mean, that I would have taken for granted would have been considered a violent crime that not would require bail, but at least bail would be optional for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there was one guy who had been arrested, I think, on 4 different bank robberies. Each of the bank robberies was using a note, though, not a weapon. And even on the 4th one, they had to let him go because it was considered nonviolent because he never used a weapon, even though it was like his 4th bank robbery. So absent the federal authorities getting involved, because there's federal law implications too. Absent that, then he's allowed to go free, which seems odd.
Okay, no, interesting. I want to get to that one right now. I'm just going to bring this up. It's recognizance, not reconnaissance. I think Kurt is saying recognizance, but it sounds like reconnaissance. Either way,
they're harassing me on my pronunciation. That's nice.
First of all, I'm bringing up the super chat. Thank you very much, Nuvi. But yes, I think I heard recognizance anyhow, but it doesn't matter. Point well taken. What the bank robber? Okay, look. So since I put up that video, I've been getting a lot of comments that are citing one of 3 examples. One of which was the bank robber, and most people don't even get into that level of detail. They say the bank robber was arrested a 4th time, always let on bail, blah blah blah. I read the article and I said to the person, "Yeah, not to give it a but the bank robber robbed a bank by slipping a note through the bulletproof glass saying, 'Give me the money.'"
Yeah,
I can understand not holding that. I mean, I'm not even sure that that's bank robbery or just asking for money.
It's definitely bank robbery. It's just an armed bank robbery.
No. Further, I appreciate it. I mean, I totally know that was tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
it's just like the idea that you go into the bank and say, "Give me your money," versus asking for money, or "Can I have $5?" Slipping a note through a glass, I could perceive as being different than even forcibly doing it. So, that's a nuance in that particular decision. And apparently the judge in one of the instances was sort of going out on a limb to say, this is nonviolent and whatever. The other case that I'm hearing is apparently a witness who was murdered based on a gang member that got out of jail.
Yeah, the MS-13 thing, yeah.
So that's the other one. I don't know the details of that. I mean, I tried to look into it. I don't know the details. I don't know what the crime was, what the person was released on.
It's unclear in that case that the witness being released was tied to the murder itself, because they could be disconnected. But there was a gang member who was released and who was released and then arrested the same day for the same offense. So I don't know if those are connected, but there was that. Yeah.
Okay. When do we get to the part where we ask the questions? Whenever you want, upside down criminphone. So there's that example that everyone is citing now. It's sort of it makes the rounds. It's the go-to source to say why the new bail reform laws are failing. And the other one was apparently somebody who was arrested on a DUI or a DWI multiple times and then ended up killing a 27-year-old woman in another driving under the influence, and was released because no bail for, I think, vehicular manslaughter is now the new. So those are the three. I don't want to say the reflexive responses. Those are the 3 examples that people are running with now, and legitimately so, to illustrate that there's nefarious consequences of these bail reform laws. The other issue was an apparently seemingly spontaneous spike in crime in January 2020, simultaneously with the implementation of these new bail reform laws.
There was also a man who was initially charged with 2nd-degree manslaughter for a stabbing death, which seemed violent, but he was released on ROR. And I think he's now being charged with murder. but there is a different case there too. So
that's the
by the way,
okay.
because someone in chat brought it up, I wanted to respond to it. Someone said,
Yeah.
I thought bank robbery is federal. It's both, like many things. You know, the federal criminal system, because we work a little bit differently than they do in Canada, as I understand it. As I understand it in Canada, you reach a certain threshold, and then like all crimes at that point are federal and not provincial. Is that broadly correct?
I don't want to say broadly correct. There are so I never did criminal law. My understanding is that there's, I say a seriousness. No, federal law is federally regulated. We have our criminal code, which is federal. Then you have your state, which are, I would say, statutory issues, which are not federal. But no, federal crimes, criminal law is federal law in Canada. Period.
So, like, if there was a murder case, for example, would that necessarily be heard on the federal level as opposed to some other level in Canada?
I'm virtually certain it would be necessarily federal.
Okay, so that is a separation in the U.S. and Canada, and the reason I asked that is because some of your viewers might be Canadian and not realize how we do things in the U.S. So we don't have that rule. The seriousness of the crime doesn't tell you if you're in state court or federal court. You can be capital murder and it's state court, not federal court, and so there's often the same thing can be illegal, both federal law and state law. So bank robbery is both a violation of state law and a violation of federal law, and you can be charged with both and convicted of both and sentenced for both. So they are both is the short answer to the question. We do things differently here.
And someone said, rightly, that any form of robbery is violent, in theory by definition. But now this is the question where you get into the bait and switch of what people are saying is the state is passing off. Don't worry, it's only for violent crimes. And then you find out that a lot of stuff that everybody in their right mind would consider to be violent somehow is not deemed to be a violent crime. So what's your understanding? Like where do they draw the line? And first of all, how do they define a violent crime versus a non-violent crime in the States for the purposes of this bail reform?
Well, to that specifically, you'd have to look at New York specific law, because in the federal law, there's this thing called the Armed Career Criminal Act, which talks about violent crimes. And the Supreme Court usually hears like one or two cases like every year trying to figure out what that means. But as to state law, you'd have to look specifically at how New York State defined it. And so you have to look at what does or does not fall within the scope of it. So, certain levels of arson wouldn't necessarily qualify because they're not necessarily violent. Pointing a laser at an aircraft wouldn't necessarily be violent. Money laundering isn't violent. So, you get into state-specific law and state-specific definitions at that point. So it would be in the bail reform bill that would define what violent is. New York can define it pretty much any way they like. But for the purposes of this exercise, just read using a weapon of some kind or causing grievous bodily harm, and you're probably there.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So we got Viva Frei. Canada gives the federal government the exclusive right to legislate criminal law, while the provinces have exclusive control over much of civil law. Yeah, this is true. Our criminal code is a federal statute. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to think of, like provincial statutes, but provincial laws, which would be statutory for things that are not necessarily of the level of federal crimes. But no, if it is a crime in Canada, it's by virtue of the federal criminal code, which is federal. Yeah. So
that is different in the U.S. We traditionally, until relatively in the last couple decades where things got different, but traditionally there were no federal criminal offenses, or very, very few. So almost all the criminal law was always state-based. And it was until very recently that the federal government started getting involved. And it's always having to be across state lines, involving interstate commerce. There's some sort of, or it's on federal land or a federal building or federal officers being involved in some way. So yeah, the criminal law is dominantly in the state. If you're being charged with murder, kidnapping, assault, whatever, your odds are you're in a state court very high.
Okay, so now, and if we want to read the law, now this is where it becomes a battle of accurate information, because I went to I don't believe it was the final version of the law. It was the amendments which were proposed in green, and then they had the old version which was struck out in red. It's a 266-page bill, yes. And you can't make any sense of it. There's no question about it. And so what you're left battling is these, images or JPEGs of people circulating lists of now nonviolent crimes that are no longer requiring bail, and you see some on the list that are objectively shocking. Like,
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned arson, manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter.
Yes.
A bunch of things which you would think would, of course, be deemed to be
Or at
violent
least there
crimes.
would at least be an option. Or at least you'd have the option. So that's where they've taken away all the discretion. So before you used to have at least the discretion, so you could have ROR'd, I think technically anything, but now they don't even have the discretion to do it. They have to release you ROR. Well, released on your own recognizance is ROR, because I keep using the acronym. But it's it just means please show up to jail at some point later. That would be great, is what that means. Yeah, and traditionally it's only been used for like relatively minor crimes, or if the person is particularly like notable or trustworthy or like has a really good reputation. Sometimes they'll give you a little bit of a break because they're like a known quantity of you have good reputation. But now we're in a whole different world.
All right. So now one other thing that people were questioning me about on the video, and you'll let me know if you know, because there's only so much depth I can go into for certain subjects, and for a video that's under 10 minutes or 10 minutes. The statistic was 62% of inmates in county jails have yet to be convicted.
It sounds plausible.
The caveat is have yet to be convicted on the charge for which they're being held, not prior convictions.
Oh, yes.
So do you know how the interplay works between county jails and state jails and federal jails? I mean, like this is something where I wasn't 100% certain about it, and I couldn't really get a full grasp on it.
Sure. So we use the term jail and prison as two separate concepts in the US. So jail is for being held pending trial, and is being used for minor crimes. Typically a year or less is what jail is. Prison is when you've been convicted of things that are beyond a year. So we're using jail and prison in two different senses. So like Rikers Island, for example, is a jail, not a prison. And, there's other rules on that. But yeah, so it's not an issue of state, county, federal. It's just an issue of what you're being charged with. So if you're being held, pending trial, you're in a jail, period.
Okay.
Unless you've already been convicted of something that would be causing you to be in prison. So if you're being charged with something and you're already in jail for other reasons, or prison for other reasons, then they're going to put you back in prison. But yeah, short of that.
So that is to say then, in theory, 100%, exceptions aside, 100% of the people in prison have been convicted, and they're not in pretrial detention.
Correct.
All right. And then if you get to jail or county jail, that would play into the argument that, of course, the number is going to be high because that's where they go to be held for the most part until their trial. And once convicted, they are not sentenced to jails, but they are sentenced to prison.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense because, as I said, the only other people in jail are usually very short-term offenses. A couple days to a year is usually the max. So if you just think about it logically, it's like the people that are there who have been convicted have such a high churn rate that, of course, that you would think the majority would be pending trial. Okay. It just works out mathematically if you think about it.
No, well, for sure. And I mean, these are they're interesting, counterpoints. Any chance you or anybody watching knows offhand the prison versus jail population? Like, is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Is the vast majority, are the vast majority of inmates in prison versus jails, or does anybody know? Because
I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, I would guess the vast majority are in prison because the prison sentences are so much longer than the jail sentences. So I'd imagine the prison population would have to be much higher than the jail population, if I had to guess, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. And now it brings up an interesting point that someone brought up. Hold on, let's just see here. NWE says, Viva, also you may have, let's say jail time in one jurisdiction and being held in another jurisdiction's jail facing other charges. Well, so this is the more, the very salient point. Yeah, if you were to average out jail, unconvicted jail inmates versus, let me rephrase. If you're to average out jail and prison, and to get to the number of unconvicted, people who are there despite having not been convicted on their particular crime, what would it look like if you include prison? And now I can understand the nuance to say we need to know what that number is, including jail and prison, not just jail, because jail necessarily is going to be higher, prison is going to be lower. And if you average them out, maybe you get to the 25% in Sweden.
Yeah.
And maybe in Sweden, for example, you have the same type of system where the 25% they're giving you, who knows how they're measuring the number based on the system.
Yeah, so there's a linguistic trick here that wouldn't necessarily occur to someone, and including Americans, because a lot of Americans won't know this either. So there's that linguistic trick of most people would use the term jail and prison interchangeably. Heck, I use the terms interchangeably, but in the very, very technical sense, they're not interchangeable. So it's like 62% of jail, and you think 62% of the entire population, and it's just not true.
Okay, that's very interesting. And then who knows what it drops to? First of all, it depends on whether or not there's more people in prison versus jail, and then that would bring down the average to bring it up, bring it down, probably bring it down. Okay, very interesting. So these are questions that I'm going to have to now look into, because those are the nuances. So the stat: 62% are in jail unconvicted. Let's see. John Migda says, listening to lawyers, my life is sad. Well, it could be sad or sadder. If you're watching the Oscars, it might be sadder.
Ooh, I think you're in a less sad universe, I have to say. And
no, this is the type of discourse that allows people to understand what they need to know. Because now what I would need to go do is figure out the amount of people, the number of people in jails versus prisons, and then the amount of people who are not convicted in prison, and then average that down with the number of not convicted people in jail to see what the overall number is, if it's 50%, 40%, if it's more than 62%. But presumably the vast majority of people in prison have been convicted on that crime. That's why they're there. So hold on. This person says, let's see here. Oh, someone's translating. Okay. Some stuff. You can average, but jails and prisons are different facilities altogether. No, true. It's just a question of, oh, here we go. Someone just put up a stat. Viva Frei. The U.S. prison population was 1.5 million prisoners, end of 2017. Population of jail inmates in the U.S. was 745,000. Okay, so who's going to do quick math? 62% of 750,000 is going to be about 500,000.
Sounds right.
So now you get that. Put that together. 2.25. 500,000 on 2.25 is now about 20%.
Yeah.
Sorry, 23%.
Yeah, about that.
And that's assuming that 0% of the prison population have not yet been convicted, which would bring us to Swedish levels, which might, eliminate that disparity in the comparison.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. The real question is, nobody's asking, why do so many Americans seem predisposed to criminal activity in the first place? Canadians are far less likely to kill each other on average. Why? I'm not sure about that. I mean, that's a type of statement I wouldn't necessarily agree with reflectively. I would like to. I don't know what the numbers are in Canada. It's not something that I've ever looked into, because it's not an issue that comes up often enough in our landscape. But I'm not sure about that. So okay, so that's it. Now the question is, they've implemented these new bail reform laws. The idea behind the law, Kurt, I mean, we've discussed it, but you want to go into the idea?
The idea behind the law was, as you pointed out in your earlier video, the idea is that, if you can't pay this bond amount from cash in pocket, or even from a bail bondsman, then you're going to be in jail until your trial is heard. And that can be months to years, depending on the situation. And so if that's kind of weird, because you're serving time for something you haven't been convicted of. Now, in the event you're found guilty, it will be given credit to you. So you will have gotten credit for that time. But in the event you're not guilty, then you serve jail for nothing. So that's not great. And, as you point out, there's a lot of incentive for people to plead for that and other reasons. Last time I checked, on the federal level, the conviction rate, including pleas, was like 92%. So it's pretty high. It's I think in the states is like 80s to 90s. So it's pretty high. People have really incentives to plead. So the idea was that people are being asked to pay certain amounts, and it only benefits the rich and who have a position to pay, and therefore we should not give these cash bail, and we should allow people to go free. Unfortunately, the consequences for that have been somewhat negative. If you believe the statistics and stuff, the police commissioner himself, named a guy of New York City, police commissioner, who is Dermot Shera, said that, since 2002, they've seen a rise in robberies of 32% and burglaries of 18% versus that same time last year. So it could be a statistical fluke, or it could be part and parcel of this issue. And since they're, since they're so contemporaneous in time, you would think that there might be some causal factor. Ex post, is, just because it happened doesn't mean it's causal. But yeah, it's very it's enlightening. Post hoc ergo proctor hoc was what I was looking for, by the way, to say it in Latin.
Someone was going to get it quickly enough. We got Nuvi says, I'm not a lawyer, not in law school. I listen to several different lawyers every time they upload. I love this discussion. No, they're good. I mean, these are not as formal discussions as other type of videos and content out there, but this is like where you can sort of freely discuss and not worry about looking silly for asking a question that maybe someone else would know if they were reflexively in the field. But so one of the stats I do recall reading was that the conviction or plea rate for people who were kept in detention was excessively high. And then the conviction rate was 50-50 for those who were released on bail, which was that they have time to prepare, on the one hand, prepare a proper defense. They're not coerced into confessions by duress of being kept in jail. They can get good lawyers. They can live their lives in the meantime, make money in order to, hire a lawyer. And so that's the idea. But then you got people saying, okay, well, they managed to get out of it, but they were still arrested and they were still detained on probable cause and whatever. And so it's almost as though getting out on bail allows them to get off on charges that they would otherwise pled guilty for or been found guilty of. And I mean, that's the interesting nuance.
I think the mistake from New York, I think the mistake that New York is making here is that they don't allow them to consider the judges. They don't allow them to consider the danger to the community as a whole as part of the factors. That, like, when you look at other states that have done this, for example, New Jersey and California, they haven't had quite these same problems. And one of the reasons is because it allows for judges to use discretion. Now, discretion, of course, is always subject to human error and human biases, which leads its own set of problems. Some people try to fix that problem through algorithms and computer software, which has its own set of problems. But
let me stop you there. Explain that, Kurt, because when I was looking into this, I didn't get into it in my video, but they actually have what was it? It was not bail algorithms. They actually have algorithms to like assess dangerousness,
likelihood to reoffend, basically danger. So the algorithms are mostly secret because they're owned by private corporations. So we don't know exactly how they work because it's closed source software, which is always great. But in general, what it's supposed to do is look at someone's like age, prior conviction history, economic input, the seriousness of this crime, family support and other factors, and assess and give a risk assessment score from which they can determine what level of bail to give. But how accurate those are is very disputed at best. Not for least the reasons that no one can look at the code and determine what numbers they're using.
Well, no, I forget. I mean, if anybody has any experience with the algorithm on YouTube and how it flags videos, I mean, you can be very suspect.
It's kind of the same idea. It's kind of the same idea, except instead of your video getting demonetized, you go to jail.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Except instead of losing $10, it's a question of having bail not be an option. Okay, and I want to get back to that actually as well, because this is a good question. PSN guides. Wouldn't raising the bail amount for rich people been a better option than ditching bail altogether? So this is another thing that a lot that was not discussed and doesn't seem to be addressed in the bail reform would have been the idea of keeping the possibility of the bail system, but exploring the alternatives to cash bail or to money bail, which would be, if you're dealing with someone who clearly doesn't have the means, exploring the alternatives to the extent depending on the nature of the crime.
There is a U.S. Supreme Court case which says you're supposed to consider someone's ability to pay as a factor when you're considering bail or any other sanction. And it says basically in so many words that we're not supposed to have debtors' prisons, but we can see how well that's going. But the Supreme Court has at least said in principle that someone shouldn't be held in bail on such an amount that they can't pay, because we're not supposed to do that. But raising the bail for rich people is an option. Like, you could put it at some percentage of their income or percentage of their wealth. So that's an option that would allow the scale. But, on the other hand, everyone gets the same speeding charge when they speed on the road, regardless of if they're driving a Toyota or Ferrari. I think that's not true in some countries in Europe, maybe Sweden, where it's actually like based on your net worth. But we don't do that here.
That was one of the big stories before I ever got into vlogs. Was this? I want to say Swedish driver who got like something like a $50,000 ticket because it was based on your income, and that's how they established the price of the ticket. Okay, so and this is another good point, and this is going to bring us into the fundamental issue. Viva, the people that can afford bail have more money, so they should also have more money to pay for a lawyer. Justice has more to do with the quality of the lawyer than the amount of money. Well, so but this is what it fundamentally illustrates, is the two-tiered system of the criminal justice system, where, and this was my reflex in listening to this, bail issue is one issue. That has to do with getting out of jail pending your trial. If one were just to have the constitutional assurance of a speedy trial, this might all become academic, where you keep in a bail system and, for the seriousness of the crime. But at the very least, you're assured to be able to get to trial within 6 months and not necessarily 2 years, because there's been outright horror stories of people waiting longer on bail than would have been their condemnation for the crime. And, civil law, we have the very same issues. Like, it takes 3-4 years to get to trial. And okay, it's fine because it's only money, and it's still a massive stress, but it takes years. For criminal issues, it's a constitutional guarantee that you have the right to a speedy trial. When does it not become speedy? And would it not be better to take all of this effort and reform, hire more judges, do whatever is needed to ensure that people get to trial quicker, as opposed to abandoning the bail system altogether?
Yeah, the right to a speedy trial is, of course, a constitutional guarantee, but as may surprise no one, New York State in particular has had some very creative interpretations that get themselves out of that problem, which have not been reviewed. So, yeah, New York is somewhat infamous for not counting certain days because the prosecutor isn't ready, because it's just like they really go to the extra mile to not have that problem. So I agree with you there.
Well, and so and it's an interesting thing also, like, this is for people who don't appreciate the interplay, the balance of interest, the right to a speedy trial. Okay, the accused wants to get to a speedy trial. The prosecutor needs its time to build the case, to do investigations, to meet with witnesses. The defendant then wants to test the prosecutor's case and wants to test the evidence, wants to prepare their own file. So on the one hand, you have people saying, we need a speedy trial, I want to get to trial ASAP. But then they're going to say, well, you can't just throw a trial at me, and you can't just throw evidence at me and say, bring me to trial in 1 month for a crime that can carry a life sentence. And so you really, literally, even within one and the same entity of the accused, have this conflicting interest of, I want to get to trial quickly, but I want to be able to prepare thoroughly. And I need to be able to, I need to gather witnesses, gather evidence, et cetera, full disclosure of the evidence of the prosecutor. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And so the whole question in the meantime.
There's also a generally accepted rule that the more guilty you are, the more that time benefits the defendant. Because with the passage of time, things can go wrong. Witnesses can disappear. Evidence can go bad. People will be reluctant to testify. People move, whatever. So, if the more guilty you are, the more defendants usually like to drag things out. So the right to a speedy trial isn't always a defendant wish. Sometimes it's the state that wants it.
The more they like to drag it out when they're not sitting in jail. If they're sitting in jail waiting for trial.
Yes.
We got Dapper Date says, why does the legal system make it so hard to expunge someone's record? Would be a lot less repeat offenders. They can have a clean record to get a job. I couldn't field that question. I mean, Kurt, do you feel comfortable with that?
I mean, I on some level, I don't understand the question. I mean, I do and I don't, because on the one hand, if you didn't have a criminal record, it would be a lot easier to get a job because you wouldn't have the criminal record. But to me, this is a strange question, because you are a criminal, you've been convicted, so you should have a criminal record, absent some sort of extraordinary circumstance. So it strikes me as odd that we would be wanting to make expungements easier because they've been duly convicted and it happened, and there should be a record of that. So, I don't agree. I don't agree with the sentiment of the question.
Well, I guess the question would be like based on the issue of, say, call them small crimes, and that hang with you forever. But you've done your time, you've paid your fine. It was a unserious crime. After 3 years, you should be able to get your file expunged so you can move on with your life, not as not like murder, assault, whatever. I mean, I can understand that, because the expunge, when you go to expunge a crime, typically it's for a non-serious crime where you have either paid the fine, done the community service or whatever, and it was a one-time off. You haven't committed any offensive since, and you just want to have a clean record so that nobody sees this stain on your life, so you can get on with it. That much I can understand. I just don't know how hard it is to expunge in cases like that. I know of the famous situations where they've been expunged, Jussie Smollett. I know of the less famous cases where they've been expunged, but it was like a DUI when you were 18 and you're 30 years old trying to become a lawyer. It depends, I guess. I just don't know how long or how hard it is to get something expunged in the ordinary course of things when someone has been behaving properly.
It's very hard.
Let's see what we got. This is the same question. Okay, we got another one down here coming this way. Nuvi says the Constitution guarantees a speedy trial.
Sure does.
Opinions on being required to request a speedy trial instead of it being default.
Well, I tend to agree with you too, because also in a civil case, if you want a jury trial, you have to ask for it as part of your pleading, which I find a little bit weird, because the Constitution guarantees the right to a jury trial for anything involving more than $20. So you should have to waive it, not ask for it. But you, at least in the current rules, you have to ask for a jury trial or you lose it. So I agree with you. It should be the default. It should be something you don't have to ask for, because the Constitution guarantees it. You should be allowed to waive it, one would presume, but the default should be that you have it, just like you have a default assumption to a jury trial. So I don't disagree with the question. I agree with that one.
No, it is. It's just an amazing. It's an amazing example of absolutely juxtaposing, but sort of almost equally powerful interests. Is you have someone who's been accused of a serious crime. I don't want to take like the most violent crimes where they have to be kept in jail just because to put them on the street would cause society to break down. Like robbery, breaking and entering, maybe some form of assault that's not egregious, where you say, okay, you're released now on bail. You can go on and live your life, and you have your trial date coming up and whatever. And by that point, you don't really care. The longer it goes, the better. The longer it goes, maybe the further away is your conviction. But the flip side is you want a speedy trial to get rid of it in the event that you think you're innocent. These are absolutely diametrically opposing interests that can embody, what's the word I'm looking for? Materialize themselves within one and the same entity, and it's crazy. You got Christopher Varian says, curious, wouldn't fear of being convicted while innocent motivate innocent to delay trial? Totally uncommon. No, I mean, that's exact ideas. First of all, thank you very much, Christopher. Yeah, the fear of being convicted. In civil law, the longer you push off, if you are the defendant, push off your trial as long as you can. It's like there's no point risking paying today what you can risk paying tomorrow. And the same, in the same, I would imagine in a criminal trial, like, hey, you might get hit by a bus in 2 years if you haven't yet stood your trial to go to jail. It's in your best interest to push off this for as long as possible. But then the flip side is, if you're guilty, it's also best to push it off long as you're living free in the meantime. The question is,
strategic considerations emerge.
What was that again?
I say strategic considerations emerge. This is what lawyers are for, to help you figure out the strategic issues that are involved in various options.
But that should be the whole crux of the issue. The only time you want to rush to trial to get it over with is when you're stuck in jail until you can sit trial, because right then you're suffering the consequences of a condemnation that you have yet to suffer. But flip side, to paint the other picture, is you are in jail because there is sufficient evidence to have detained you on the apparent criminal act. And then the only question is, how serious was it and how much evidence is there to keep you in jail?
Yes. Now, let me ask you a question, because this wasn't clear in your video, at least to me. You mentioned that Canada has cash bail, but I assume that you do not have the commercialized industry. So my question, if you know the answer, is, assume that how does cash bail work? I guess in Canada is the broad question. Like, do they assign it based on income? Is it such that everyone could theoretically pay? Do you have this problem where people are being held pending trial because they can't afford it, and then you can't get the commercial end either? So how is that working out for you guys?
So I reached out to a criminal law friend, and if and when I might just do a live stream with them who can answer all these questions. I don't actually know. I know we have cash bail. I know there are people in jail who don't have the bail to post to get out. We do not have the commercial bail bondsman market that you have in the States. So, and I was thinking about it, and I was trying to get an answer. It's like, I called up two people actually. Like, do people just go to the bank to get out a loan so they can pay for it, and they don't, they might explain what it's for, and depending on their ability to pay the interest on the loan, are the banks effectively the bail bondsman in Canada? I don't know, and I would like to do probably a live stream with someone who is a criminal lawyer on a, who knows this in and out, who can answer all these questions. But I'm not sure. I just know that we have cash bail. We have an issue, like sometimes people can't post bail; they're stuck in jail. But we don't have. We have InstaCheck, and we have we have the same things to some extent that you have in the States, but we don't have the bail bondsman market. There's no question about it. So I just don't know how people who need the money go about getting it in Canada. If it's
I mean, it would just off the top of my head, and I'm certainly open to having my mind changed, but it would seem to me that having the bail bondsman as an option has to be better, because you can't afford 100%, but if you pay 10%, and you're going to lose that 10%, so you're never getting that 10% back. But if you can afford 10% and you get the rest offered, so you're not in jail, that seems like at least a nice option to have. So it seems like better, but if it's not better, I'd like to know why it's not better.
Well, and that was the reflex that I had. Is like, what's wrong with it? Basically, you have I don't want to call them like loan sharks, but you effectively have this bail bondsman market that Newsom was complaining about, or that PolitiFact was saying was the issue. That seems like a good response to a real problem that frees people as opposed to punishing them. If you can't pay the 10%, okay, your problem is back to square one. You're stuck in jail because you can't post bail. If you can afford the 10%, it seems like a solution, and it seems like a good thing, not a bad thing.
It seems like you may not be able to afford the 100%, but you may be able to afford the 10% because it's 10%. So I would imagine that would sweep in a lot more people. So it seems like it would free a lot more people, even if you're losing the money. But tell me why I'm wrong, Canadians.
No, I did not reflexively think of the bail bondsman industry as a bad thing. Period. I said it's good. It meets a demand. It's high risk lenders, basically, is the way I saw it. MZ Don, I just lost here. MZ Don says, in Canada, most accused are not kept in jail until trial. They walk free. So no, I'm not well versed in criminal law in Canada. I know for the serious crimes, some people do not even get bail, depending on the nature of the accusation. Mm-hmm. Others, it's like $1 million. It could be an astronomical amount. So I don't know if the rule. I don't know if in Canada compared to the U.S., the rule in Canada is effectively now the exception in New York. But it's like we're dealing with different size. We're just dealing with massively different situations. 35 million versus 350 million. Different types of crimes, different types of demographic in terms of like the types of crimes being committed. It's a different situation entirely. We just don't have the same reality in Canada or in Sweden. Like, it's nice to compare the U.S. to Sweden in terms of mass incarceration rates, where you're dealing with a country of 10 million people versus a country of 350.
That's a lot more homogenous in every respect. It's smaller and more homogenous. So it's culturally homogenous because geography implies diversity too, because the more people get spread out, the more people are going to change. Just so smaller countries tend to be more homogenous. And their populations in Europe, especially, tend to be more native born. I mean, everyone in the United States is pretty much from somewhere else. So, we have all kinds of problems.
No, well, I go with it's just scale. It's a scale. First of all, I don't want to get into I don't think the gun issue is the major issue in the States. You got 350 million people in the freest country in the world versus how many people live in Sweden? I think it's under 10 million, I think. No, am I going to be totally wrong about that? But it's totally, you can't really compare it. And even in Canada, you can't really compare the reality of the social situation to that in the States. It's apples and oranges. Hold on one second. Let's just see here. We got someone just sitting with the Canada crime.
You're saying you're also that your camera connection leaves a little bit to be desired. So I don't know if there's anything to improve that, Viva.
Only to get closer to my modem, possibly. But here we say, I'll get this in a second here. In Canada, granted release on bail, you need individuals to act as sureties, pledge, asset in the amount of your bail. If you fail to attend, the people forfeit those assets. So, and that's the distinction between certi and bail, is that in Canada, I think it's the same in the States and other places as well. You don't need someone to put up the cash; you just need someone to guarantee that you're good for it, which was the history of the bail in the first place. But
yeah, and you can do that also in the U.S. too. A lot of people put up their houses, or if it's their their child, they put up the parents' house. Well, so it's not unusual to do that.
It also doesn't resolve the issue, because that's just a question to means and not to the.
Yeah, it's also a question of who has the wealth. It's just an issue of finding the wealth somewhere else. So, okay, sureties are great if you happen to have one, but if you're poorer, then you probably don't have sureties who are rich. So, yeah, bondsman might be the way to go.
Apache November Rain says Canada's crime rate is 39.5 by population. US is 46. Venezuela is the highest at 85. The lowest reliable reporting is Japan, 15.9. For giggles, UK is 43. So I happen to know what the intentional homicide rate is pretty much for every country in the world, because that's how I decide where I'm going to visit. If I'm visiting a new country, that's the first thing I look up. So I don't know what crime we're talking about here. If we're talking violent crime, non-violent crime, robbery, whatever.
I can tell you the U.S. violent crime rate has dropped by half since the 80s, so we're doing pretty good over here.
There's a lot of exaggeration. There's a lot of exaggeration and hyperbole, but all that to say, where did we start with this? It was about comparing Canada to the U.S. I don't, the situation is just different. So I know that there are people who don't get bail. There are people who have post $1 million bail, and if they have the money, they can do it. And then there's people who sit in there, depending on the nature of the crime. So it's just a different scale compared to what is in the States, and it becomes a different scope of the problem. Okay, so we'll see what happens. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is it sounds sick to say that you to some extent it's not a test, but rather you'll see the way the new policy goes, and if the poo-poo hits the fan,
yeah,
then you'll vote out the people that voted it in, and you'll get new people in. The problem then becomes, and this is where everybody has the biggest issues with the government, is there becomes a vested interest for the current administration to hide and fudge the numbers to make their policies look like they're not disastrous and better than they are, so they don't get voted out of power. And that's where you get into sort of the Angela Merkel Germany type situation, where people will begin to question the official numbers coming out of the government, because it's always going to be the fear that they are trying to hide the negative consequences of their policy decisions, and you'll never be able to believe them. And then if the information comes out, then whatever. So that is going to be the next stage of the game. Is okay, New York has implemented this bail reform. There was a spike in January. Some police chiefs were attributing it directly to the policy. Others are saying it's totally fluke. I would tend to think it's totally fluke, because even if there were going to be negative consequences from it, my feeling is it would be months down the line and not the day after type thing. But we'll see. But then it becomes a question of, do you trust the stats coming out of the government? And if you don't, you'll never be satisfied. And if you do, then you have to see what the government says the stats are, based on increase in crime and whatever. There were stats that there was increase in robbery, but decrease in violent crimes, increase in breaking and entering. But that's going to be the question. If you can't trust the government, you can't trust the government, and then whatever they say is going to be irrelevant to you. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, sorry, no, that was not a question. Let's get this out of here. Okay, so we'll see where it goes. We're going to follow up on it, but that was the idea behind the bail reform laws.
I think the odds are that they repeal the whole thing, scratch it, and try again is my working bet.
But who's going to repeal it? Like, how would that work in terms of process?
Well, it would be the Albany state. It would be the Albany legislature, and presumably they could do it by just saying, House bill whatever is hereby repealed in full. That would do it. It would just put everything back the way it was before the bill passed in the first place. So,
to me, the fundamental absurdities of it is that it's one thing to say, it's one thing to implement the new rule across the board, but to leave the discretion to the judge, because that's what they're there for. I mean, everybody says everything is a case-by-case basis. That's what the judges are there for. And when you eliminate the discretion of the judge, if they see something unique in any particular situation, that's not a protective measure. I guess it's a protective measure of the accused, but then it eliminates that protective measure for society as a whole. So I could appreciate all of the bail reform to the extent that the judges retained discretion. But what I never understood in the first place is how and I understand what you said earlier, is it's the potential dangerousness of the criminal or the accused, vis-a-vis the victim, but not vis-a-vis society as a whole, which that blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a DUI.
Well, that's a New York and I think Louisiana thing specifically. And New York has historically done it because they were afraid that if they did danger to the community at large, that would become a proxy for race. That the young black kid, as it were, would be judged the danger to society, but the affluent white kid wouldn't be. So that the concern was that it would just become a proxy. But other states have not had that problem, or at least haven't had the problem to the degree they've struck it. So I think New York would probably be wise to adopt it, would be my recommendation if they were listening to me.
Because it's interesting. What I was about to say is, the potential dangerousness where, vis-a-vis the victim, but not vis-a-vis society. A DUI, very unlikely he's going to strike the same victim that he struck the first time, and in which case it could only be the danger to society and whether or not they pose a greater risk or a lesser risk, and that should have an impact on the bail. Nothing else makes any sense to me on that front, which is why looking into this, where I saw that, since the 70s, potential dangerousness of the criminal is not a factor in bail. That should be the only factor in bail. I mean, this
is off topic, but did you see the new Way Forward Act by any chance that the Democrats are proposing for the immigration thing?
I only read the article summarizing it, and
I read the bill. I had the bill. I read it on the stream last night. And I'm like, no, none of these things. But yes, you have super chats to respond to. So we'll do that now.
So we got Tom Raider says, Viva, YouTube is restricting super chat content. I don't know. Tom Raider, without purchasing another super chat, explain to me how, so that I have yet another element to add of my YouTube chicanery. Thank you very much for that. I missed. Hold on 1 second. I got this one. Yeah, I'm curious as to how they could be limiting super chat, but do tell me. His name was Raider. Okay. A. Amoroso, do prosecutors in Canada have immunity like the U.S.? Yeah, they have immunity barring malicious prosecution, as they should, because nobody. And bringing it back to the impeachment, attorneys should never. No one should go after attorneys personally for doing their job for their clients. And the idea of even discussing disbarring the attorneys who represented Donald Trump, even if you think whatever you think, that crosses a line where it's nice people don't like lawyers, but you know what people hate more than lawyers? A society without people to defend people. That's the next.
You hate a lawyer till you need one, right?
Like I was going to say, like the cops. That's
you hate a cop till you need one too. Same thing. Yeah.
John O'Brien says bail reform is not even the real problem. Second-degree manslaughter is no bail. But I need to know what second-degree manslaughter is. I don't know what that is as a crime. I know what manslaughter.
It's going to be state-specific definition, because this is again one of the problems or differences between the United States and Canada, because you in Canada have a federal system for all the criminal stuff. So presumably you have one definition of murder, for example, whereas we in the United States have one for every jurisdiction. So you can give me a hypothetical and ask me, is it murder? And it might depend on where you are. And same thing for everything else, because we don't have one uniform definition. And of course, there's case law interpreting every statute that differs from state to state. So there's no 100% rule. It's good times.
I'm looking up to see if I can get second degree. See, I don't even know I don't do criminal law, so I don't know reflexively what second degree manslaughter would be in.
Presumably in New York is what they're referring to.
Yeah, I got CBC in Canada. What's the difference between first degree murder and second degree murder and manslaughter? See, I'm not even sure that second degree murder. Manslaughter is homicide committed without intent, although there may have been an intention to cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what second-degree manslaughter is. Manslaughter carries no minimum sentence except when it is committed with a firearm. I don't know what second-degree manslaughter is in Canada. I'm not sure that we have such a concept. But okay, so sorry, the 15 days to turn over all prosecution evidence after arraignment, including witnesses' information, that is dangerous. 15 days to turn over all prosecution evidence.
That's too short. That's too short too. But I think I do think the bail reform is part of the problem. This 15-day thing is also part of the problem. But yeah, I agree. That's too short to get your stuff together. Yeah.
Okay, totally interesting. Oh, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's it's a cynical thing to say that the government is using society to some extent as a guinea pig to see how.
Well, according to the chat in New York, second-degree manslaughter is when you recklessly cause the death of another without intent. So it's the mens rea is the split. That makes sense.
It makes sense, and now I can think of an example where I would not require bail, like somebody's lighting one of those fireworks for the 4th of July, or the baby shower thing. This is an actual example where they were doing the gender reveal of the baby, and what did they do? They had fireworks, and apparently it exploded, and a shard of something hit someone in the heart at the party and killed them. I can appreciate that there should be no bail for that type of situation, but that's why I just want a judge who will know the facts, know the situation, and make that assessment, and not have it be some not carte blanche rather, but some broadly applied rule that it's never in that case. Because I can imagine a case where recklessly driving your cars drunk at 4 a.m. and you kill somebody who's walking across the street. There, I could imagine bail might be reasonably justified, even though it might be the same type of second-degree manslaughter. Okay. Zorro says, thank you for, good night, Zorro. Thank you for the vlogs. Thank you. My pleasure.
Good night to you, sir.
I wanted to do another one today. I was going to do another PolitiFact.
I have time. I've got time and energy and whiskey. Everything is great.
Okay, so look, we'll see what happens with this bail reform. It's interesting. You can understand the human element. You can understand why it's necessary in spirit. You can see why the government can't necessarily do things better than private individuals, and you can see how inept governments can enact the best policy in nature that can have the most negative consequences in reality. And we'll see where this goes. It's
it's a challenge of trying to think through the consequences of everything, and I think they kind of missed that boat a little bit on this one.
Someone says I need a mod.
Anytime you want to give me the blue wrench will just be just fine, by the way.
This is not a power issue. This has nothing to do with power. This has to do with responsibility. I don't ever want to feel like I have to blame somebody else for something that goes wrong. I would rather take all the blame myself all the time. It's like editing. I can't let somebody else edit, because the difference between, making a big gaffe and making a good video is like one extra word or one extra cut. So I'm sorry. I'll see one day. I'll see one day if I can do it. We got Viva Frei. Presumptions are probably a better way to deal with it than hard and fast rules. No, how about just let the judge do their job without handcuffing the judge? I mean, that's basically what this comes down to. But I understand the rationale. Like, yeah, if it were officially non-violent stuff that nobody would reasonably think was a violent crime, nobody would have an issue with it. But now you see the list and you see like arson. But then I don't know if arson is like unintentional arson versus intentional arson, like murderous arson versus, lighting a Roman candle and it goes off and starts your neighbor's house on fire. Like,
well, didn't you cover that case where the arson in question was someone burning a flag as opposed to like burning a building?
I did. That was I know that case.
Yeah. So like arson doesn't necessarily imply like it's just burning of some property. So yeah.
Yeah.
Viva is a solo general. Yes, he is.
By the way, if anybody hears anything that sounds like gas, it's my foot on the bottom of the bench. If nobody heard anything, then I don't want to have a Swalwell moment. I have my feet making some noise.
Is this like a Jim Acosta thing, or like who was that guy on the? Yeah, wait, this is totally not him doing anything on TV.
No. The only thing I can think of was Swalwell releasing gas.
Yeah, that guy Swalwell was the one I was looking for. Yeah, that was the one I was looking for. Yeah. Is this the Swalwell defense? Is that what we're doing now?
It's the defense to nothing that happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to something else.
Okay.
Do you want to do? I mean, people were asking Nancy Pelosi tearing up the document, whether or not it was an actual crime. Because it goes back to the PolitiFact fact checking. So for everybody who doesn't know Steve Leto, I guess, or Leto, everybody knows Leto's law, I think here.
Yeah.
Leto just did. It was on Wednesday or Thursday that he did a video on the subject, and it's pretty thorough. It's pretty exhaustive.
Yeah.
It's pretty convincing that it was not a crime, and it's a 20-minute video that goes through the statute and the intent and etc. And it goes through some assumptions. And the purpose for anybody who hasn't seen my video fact checking PolitiFact, I took issue with two of their fact checking. One was with this bail reform statement that Gavin Newsom said that, Philippines and the U.S. Duterte's Philippines and Trump's U.S. were the only countries in the world that had money bail, which is patently false. So
yeah, I was mentioning this to you in text, and I wanted to recite the story, but there was a PolitiFact. I don't remember what it was. It was years ago, but they quoted a guy. The statement was true. It was true, and they rated it as false. And I actually wrote it into PolitiFact. I'm like, this statement is, by the words used, true. And they actually wrote me back, and they said, yeah, we acknowledge it, and our rating system can be really complicated, but we looked at the spirit of the thing, so we thought false was the way to go. That's basically the point where I gave up.
It's first of all, do we have is Elon Musk actually in the chat? Okay,
but he is. Elon, please donate me a car. I'd like a car, please.
Well, car, you get a car. You get a car. Cars for everybody.
Elon, I will happily shill for Tesla. Just give me a car, please.
PolitiFact is so nonsensical that at one point I think one of the statements they checked was that Trump said the majority of fill in the blank, and they said no, it's false because it's actually 48%. And we're really going to quibble over 3%, really? No, that's the essence of it. But so the first statement I was looking into was this statement by Gavin Newsom that said only Duterte's Philippines and Trump's America have money bail, and they rated it as mostly true, because the Philippines and the States have a commercial bondsman market, as though that was the question. So that was where I took issue. The second thing I took issue with was their pants on fire rating for Trump's statement that Nancy Pelosi, it was terrible what she did, she may have broken the law. And I said, okay.
It may be false, but there's no way he's lying.
Well,
because he wouldn't know. He wouldn't know for sure. And even I wouldn't know for sure. So it's saying it's a lie is a whole other level.
Well, it's a whole other level, but even saying it's like overtly false. When I see a lawyer like Steve Leto, sorry, and I don't mean to mispronounce his name. When I see any lawyer make a 20-minute video which goes into the law, which posits certain assumptions or suppositions to say, therefore, I think it's inapplicable, I don't even call that false. I say that's nice. You have an opinion, and it's probably right. I think Leto's right. I don't think even Robert Barnes and Nate Brody. It's like it might be a crime, but even if it were, no one's going to prosecute it. That's different. To say that it's plausible or conceivable but unlikely is different than saying pants on fire. And so when it comes to this Nancy Pelosi thing, even Leto in his assessment said, operating on the assumption that it was not an original, or it was not a he didn't say an original copy, but an official
copy.
Yeah. So okay, that's a big basis to be operating on, because I could understand why Nancy, the Speaker of the House's signed copy, could conceivably be a document that should be preserved for the National Archives. I could imagine it.
Well, not the National Archives, for the congressional record itself, because I'm sure it's on record with the National Archives. But for our purposes, that's not the issue, because it's a State of the Union is to Congress, and traditionally was in writing, not given orally. And personally, I think we should go back to written, but whatever. So the copy has to be handed to Congress and entered into the congressional record, because it's Congress's record. And I'm sure the National Archives has a copy too. So the operative question is not, was this the National Archives copy? Because it wasn't. The operative question would be, is this the official copy of either Congress as a whole or the House? And I don't know. So the question would be like, well, what have they done in years past? How does the official record get entered in the congressional record in years past? Who is that handed to? I would presume it's some clerk or secretary that the official copy is handed to. I would assume it's not the official copy handed to Pelosi. And I would assume it's just a courtesy copy, which was Dave Leto's assumption. So yeah, I would assume that it's not an official record of the United States. But yeah, I'm assuming. But and I also agree with Steve Leto that even if it is, like, yeah, another copy can be made, and it's just too petty for me to care. I say this as a conservative and as a Republican. I don't like Pelosi, but the act was so juvenile, I just cannot be bothered to dignify it.
Well, so and that's the bottom line is, okay, it doesn't even matter. Yes, like in court records, you have an original, which is nothing more than a printout that is signed with a backing that says original. And if you take that and shred it, go print up another original and sign it, and you have your original again. And that's the bottom line. The only question is, from a purely theoretical perspective, if there were no crimes to investigate in this country, could it be conceivably a crime? It could. And it's just like to say that, well, we're operating on the assumption that it was an unofficial copy that she had. It was unsigned. It was courtesy. She could do it. Okay, if you're operating on that assumption, you're basically stipulating the facts that are at the heart of your opinion, and you're issuing an opinion, which is fine. But to go from an opinion, or sorry, to
fact, I agree with you on political fact. They are making assumptions that vendors are rating. They don't know. How could they possibly know?
No,
did they like call the U.S. House and ask the parliamentarian or ask the Secretary of Senate, hey, what's your official procedures for that? That would have been super helpful.
No,
they didn't seem to do that.
They had an expert from the University of Minnesota saying, it was probably a copy, a courtesy copy.
Why not just call the U.S. House and ask?
Well, I'm sure Rep. Gates is going to get to the bottom of it sooner than later. But even Gates is not going after criminal. I think he said he's filing whatever complaint. But
he's filing an ethics complaint, which is totally fine. That's an internal issue for the House and the ethics issue. So is it an ethics issue? Yeah, probably. Will the House do anything about it? Of course not, because the Democrats have a majority. But yeah, is there an ethics problem? Sure. Is it criminal? Almost certainly not. And again, too petty. Don't care.
You want to talk politics? Will the House do anything? Probably not, because it's Dem controlled. Well, there might be people vying for the next Speaker of the House position who might. That's
possible too. I guess that's possible. Maybe that'd be one heck of a backstab, House of Cards style. But sure, why not?
All's fair in love and politics. John Pfister says, "What's the too long? Is it too long?
Didn't read.
Okay,
didn't read. It's usually a semicolon, but yeah, too long. Didn't read.
Let's not get that picky. So, what is the too long? Didn't read of the New Way Act Forward?
I have thoughts.
Go for it. I mean, I know what I think, but I know that I don't understand enough to issue a statement.
So okay. Well, the too long didn't read version of the New Way Forward Act is, I think it pretty much creates open borders for the United States in the proposal. This is a proposal. It's not law yet, but here's what it does, among other things. It prohibits any new facilities for detaining people from being built. It prohibits building facilities for people who are subject to monitoring. It prohibits any unaccompanied child from being deported. So if we find a random child who is unaccompanied, then they have to be transferred to Health and Human Services, presumably to be put up for adoption or something. It prohibits anyone who's a primary caregiver, like a mother, from being adopted. So mother and child are found, we can't deport either one. It strikes out the violent felonies clause. Oh, and it also strikes out the repeat offenders clause of the Immigration Act. So there's a clause in the Immigration Act which says basically for multiple repeat offenders, they get escalation. So it just cancels that section altogether. And probably my personal favorite section of the thing is that anyone who has been deported since April the 24th of 1996, this proves I read it, anyone who's been deported since April 24th, 1996 has to have their case reopened and reconsidered. So we have to reconsider 24 years of deportations. And also like anyone who's been deported in the terms of like their presence in the United States, because there's laws that deal with how long you have to be in the United States physically for certain things to apply. All their time overseas now counts as being in the United States. So it's like they were here the whole time. So long story short, I oppose this bill. I don't think it's a good idea.
Skip. Let's put that last one on the back burner. The one that I understood from reading the summaries was that it was basically the elimination of deportation for conviction of violent crimes.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes it optional as well. So it goes from shall to may. So, and it also says that the immigration judges, well, it says the attorney general, but the way this is done is he gives the authority to the immigration judges who do it. So the attorney general, that means the immigration judges, they should consider the humanitarian need. They should consider family unity as factors. So yeah, you can be a criminal and not be deported for that crime, which is now required. So that's new.
Are the individuals that we're talking about for the purpose of deportation subsequent to a conviction? Are we talking about legal? I want to say legal. Are we talking about people with green cards, people who have visas? Or are we talking about illegal, undocumented?
We're talking about undocumented in the statute. Yeah, green card holders are in a whole other category of different stuff.
Okay, so the idea then is under the New Way Forward.
Mm-hmm.
Undocumented, depending on your political party. Illegal, depending on your other political party. Mm-hmm. Convicted of certain crimes is not
It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory deportation. And also, I also like that it defines. I think it's the term is protected persons who can't be deported. Defines protected persons as anyone under the age of 21, anyone over the age of 16, and my favorite part, anyone who identifies as gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, or intersex. So I was saying on my stream, the smart thing to do for any illegal immigrant would just be to identify as bi, because it's an identification. Hi, I'm bi. This is my wife. She's also bi. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't disprove it. So, I think there's some problems there. I do not think this is a good idea. I'm not sure the 43 people who have signed on to this so far have actually read it, because it's basically creating open borders. Which the Republicans have been saying for years, and the mainstream media has been saying, no, Democrats don't want open borders. I'm like, I can read.
What? Okay, so now, I had two questions. Oh, sorry. Practically speaking, for someone who has no idea how this works, the deportation. Conceptually, how does it work? You know the country of origin. I mean, you have to know the country of origin. You then have to bring the person back to that country, and logistically, I mean, I have never even thought of this. Where do you leave them in that country?
Airport?
The airport.
Yeah.
Get off, and you're in the terminal.
Yep.
And then you have to know with certainty the country of origin, which I presume requires certain documentation. That part I can understand. The second part, 43 people support the law.
I believe that's the correct number. The bill is co-sponsor is correct. I believe that's the correct number.
How many? And so, for someone who knows nothing of this, what does it take in order to pass?
Oh, it would be half the House. The House has 235, so that's 218. Did I do the math correctly?
No, 118, 235. So what? Yeah, 118. Okay,
no.
235 in the House.
Yes. So it's 435. It's 435 in the House. 435.
No, then you're right. Then it's two. Yeah, it's 218.
Yes, thank you.
It requires 218.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, 43 is not much, and then if you can 43, you can narrow down these current supporters. Do we know who currently supports this bill?
Yes, they're on the bill. So it's the usual suspects: Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, Omar, Blumenthal, et al. So it's a lot of the Democrat Party. If
I may ask the reflexive question I have as a critical thinker, what of the voting rights of all the people that are affected by this bill? They get to vote. They would get to vote, or is there no discussion of voting rights?
There's no discussion of voting rights in this bill in terms of that. It's not granting voting rights. To have voting rights, you'd have to be a citizen.
Yes. Okay. Now that's what I'm just trying to figure out a way that this, because you have to thinking cynically that one would imagine that this bill would have some sort of longer term impact on the party proposing it. So it would either be direct or indirect.
Well, I mean, I think granting, apparently any unaccompanied minor can come and stay. So I guess give us all their children. I mean, and give us, if you can, and also there's a 5-year statute of limitations, because deportations currently under current law don't have a statute of limitations. You can be deported at any time, no matter how long you've been here. But under the proposal, under the New Way Forward Act, it's a 5-year statute of limitations. So if you can escape discovery for 5 years, you can never be deported. Outstanding. Yay.
Yeah, okay. It's
I have problems with this.
you don't say.
I do not think this is a good policy idea on any level.
What are the, like, as someone who's on the ground in the States, is there a reasonable prospect of this being passed, or is it just outlandish and it's going to have the usual suspects supporting it for whatever clout they want to get for supporting it?
It won't pass today. I mean, that's for sure. But I think some of this is dependent on what happens in the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party responds to that. Because at least from my position, and again, I consider myself conservative and Republican, but it seems, at least to me, that the more left-leaning elements of the Democratic Party appear to be taking over from the more moderate elements. So, if that's true, then I would imagine that in the future, if the Democrats take over, they may have the votes to do it in the future. But that's projecting a lot in terms of like how the Democratic Party is going to change in terms of who they elect in terms of this presidential election and how they do in terms of response. And so it won't pass today, but will it pass in the future? It might. It depends on how things develop. It's a little bit much to project.
All right. And now Denny RN says, why can't it be vetoed?
It can be vetoed, of course.
Explain it to an ignorant person. Who the veto would be? Presidential veto, or would it be?
The president can veto anything. It's a bill, just like any other bill. It can be vetoed. So in the United States, a bill has to become law. It has to pass both houses of Congress and be signed by the president. And if the president doesn't sign it, it's called vetoed. And to make it a law anyway, you have to again get 2/3 of each house. So that the Congress can override the president's veto by 2/3 of each house, but yeah, the president can just say no, this is not a law.
Okay, and if the House and Congress are run by the same parties, and the president vetoes it, presumably because they're not of the same party as House and Senate, the president vetoes and then it passes with 2/3 in any event.
2/3 is a lot, man. I mean, to get 2/3 of both houses of Congress is not easy. But if you can do it, then it becomes a law. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Dapper Dave says, government officials meet you at the airport, port of entry. You must notify officials prior with removal. Have to obtain travel document from the consulate.
Sounds plausible. Yeah, I'm there.
Very interesting.
I'm sure we inform their government about it. Yes, I'm sure that happens.
Dude XO1 says, would New Way Forward work in Canada politically? We don't have the same...
Can I come to Canada, Viva? Can I come live with you?
Well, if you want to come live in the freezing cold, I mean, this is why literally we don't have the same concerns because we don't have the same immigration pressures. We don't have the same border issues. I mean, our border is with the Arctic Ocean and the United States, and
the no touching zone.
well, wait a minute. What does the no touching zone mean? Just so I don't get into trouble.
Oh, you don't know about that one? No, the border between the U.S. and Canada is completely deforested. The entire border, all 2,400 miles of it. It's like 10 like 100 yards on either direction. So it's the no touching zone.
Kurt,
no trees here. No trees.
You want to know how crazy I am? When you said the no touching zone, I said that, okay, I think to a physical border, then I think maybe that was like a political groping joke that I now have just tacitly agreed to.
We mowed all the trees, so our trees will not intertwine.
So this is not a joke. We know someone who lives on an island. It's an island that it's right between Quebec and Vermont. And you have the no touching zone on the island. Like it's I don't know how wide it is because we only saw it from the shoreline. Yeah. And if you get into it, you get into big trouble because you can't like get into that area where there's no trees. And it's totally cool. I mean, it's cool in a cynical way. But no, would the New Way Forward work in Canada politically? I don't think so. People in Canada are irritated enough at the border issues that we're having subsequent to the laws that have been enacted in the States, where now people are crossing the border, not into the States, but from the States into Canada. And it's become a political issue. Like it's even the Liberal government has addressed it as an issue in terms of the number of people, illegal immigrants crossing the border from the States who are trying to get out of the States now because of the new laws in the States that are trying to come to Canada because it's easier to get into. So I don't think it would fly politically, but we just don't have the same underlying issues that would make it as big of an issue as it is in the States. But for anybody who has not seen it's like they took a razor and just went through the trees, and it's very cool. Okay, so that's it. So the new way forward, it is. I've read it. I've only read reviews of it and summaries of it as like full disclosure, and I said in my video, as I did with the bail reform laws, because the law itself it's just overwhelming. It's overwhelming for anybody. And then the question is, who do you rely on to summarize what is an overwhelming piece of legislation to read in the first place? And this is why
you can rely on me. I read it.
Oh no! First of all, I will rely on you with the same skepticism at the very least.
Enough. Like that's fair enough. I appreciate that.
But these bills and these statutes, they're incomprehensible. And then you think that the government officials or the House representatives voting on them have read and understood, because it's easy to read and say, oh, I read it and I saw the words and I have no idea what it means. Now someone summarized it for me. And I mean, that's the way it is. Let's see. Under the New Way Forward, Viva could come here and get out of the cold.
Presumably.
I've been saying for a while, I would sooner try to, if I ever felt there were fundamental problems in Canada, and I'm sort of, not to say I'm feeling it, but I'm feeling it, I would sooner run for prime minister than fleeing. If I became hopeless, I would flee. And I would flee to the Yeah.
You can always come and live with me in Texas, man. It's as free as you could get.
From what I understand, there's amazing fishing in Texas as well. So
There you go.
Let me see here. Okay, I got some comments I cannot bring up on the chat. Let's bring this one down. Okay, so that's interesting. So I think we've covered that. We've covered.
My glass is empty. Should I refill it?
You could top it off. I mean, we'll go for a little bit longer just because
I've got lots of energy, so whatever.
I know. My kids are going to get up at like 7 a.m. tomorrow, and it's going to be. I had 2 kids today. My wife took one skiing, and I took the other 2, and we had a busy day. It was good. So let's another thing that's been on my radar is Bernie Sanders tweeted something to the effect today that he lives 50 miles from the border. Nobody in Canada has to take out their credit card when they go to their doctor. And then I responded.
Okay, healthcare. Yeah, we can talk healthcare. Sure.
Well, so I retweeted. I said, it's nice to conceive of it as free healthcare in Canada, but I've been trying to figure out the numbers. Our healthcare system costs 11.4% of our GDP, which was $2.28 trillion. And so you put a number on that, and I think it's 228 billion is our national healthcare costs. And what was I going to say? On average, it costs 38% of every province's total budget. And I didn't get into the numbers of the total budget, but so I said, okay, bear in mind, you have your federal, I don't know, and I don't know exactly how it breaks down in terms of federal costs versus provincial costs. I think the federal allocates the budget, apportions it to the provinces, and then they take care of it on the provincial level. 38% on average, of the provincial budgets total are for healthcare. So if I pay $25,000 to the provincial government and I pay $20,000 to the federal government on an income of $80,000 or $90,000, the provincial budget that goes to healthcare is $10,000. And that's the free healthcare. And it's the free healthcare of a system where we ended up there over the holidays because of some asthma issues. We ended up there because of a suspected broken leg. We spent 6, 7, 8 hours in the ER. And one time we were in the ER for so long, I asked, I was like, we've been here all day. Hell on earth, by the way, like kids coughing, vomiting. Like it's just, And the doctor's like, 6 hours is the average waiting time. I said, so that's.
I have to say that occasionally you will see an actual billboard for a hospital that will actually have like a digital display for the waiting time for that hospital in real time. You occasionally will see that driving in the United States, and it's like 20 minutes or 15 minutes when you pass by.
First of all, I will take that expense, because if I knew that I was going to have to wait 6 hours, I would have told my kid, you walk on your broken leg, suspected broken leg, we'll deal with it tomorrow. But it is crazy, the perception that we have free healthcare. And I'm saying, the waits are so long. Oh, that was what the doctor said. Well, so I'm texting my not GP. What's the one when you have for kids? Pediatrician. I'm texting my kid's pediatrician. It's like, what do we do? And he says, oh, go to a private clinic. It's like, all right, dude, but I could have done that from the beginning, which is the response is when the public system is too long, go to a private clinic. So you have
which is kind of like, what are we talking about, right?
That's right. Back to your 2-tier justice system, back to your 2-tier healthcare system. Yeah. And you have people in the States and Bernie Sanders, praising free healthcare, socialized healthcare, not appreciating that. Incidentally, when I said it's $10,000 on a salary of $80,000 a year, that's if you use it or not. So don't use your free healthcare. You still paid for it. And it's free only to the extent that the government has already pre-charged you for it. And it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. I think the issue is not the healthcare costs. The issue the issues is it's really the cost of medicine. It's the cost of the procedures, which get artificially inflated when it's subsidized to some extent, one way or the other. And it's So that was my in the States. I mean, you have private health. You have private healthcare.
Yeah, it's private healthcare, and it's also really regulated healthcare at the same time. So in some ways, I think we're in the worst of both worlds, because it would probably be better either way. It would be better if it were more public and just as regulated, or it was more private and less regulated. A lot of the best paying doctors are the most unregulated, and sometimes the best quality care. For example, laser eye surgery, for example, the price on that has dropped a lot because it's more unregulated. It's paid out of pocket. There's no insurances covering this. And so, there's a thriving private market that's uncovered. And dermatology is kind of similar than that. Sometimes it's covered, but there's a lot of uncovered care that can be, that makes it really desirable for both doctors and people. So one solution is to make it less regulated and let the private market sort itself out, which has its own set of problems, of course. As to more government control in terms of government running my healthcare, I have a lot of concerns, not the least of which is the VA, Veterans Administration. The VA has been the VA is public healthcare for veterans. It is trying to give healthcare to all the veterans who have so served our country. And it has been, how should we say, not run very well in the United States.
Abject failure.
Yeah, that would be a one way to describe it. So I have serious concerns seeing how the government has run the VA, that they will be equipped to run all of the U.S. healthcare. I'm not feeling a great deal of confidence in this system. So that, the idea of a government takeover, not the least of which is like there's the tax issues and the whole bunch of stuff, but like fundamentally, I just don't trust the government to do it. Period, because they haven't really shown themselves equipped to do it, in my humble judgment.
And I'm not bringing up the memes about the Iowa caucus. I think this is not a partisan issue. I think this is a fundamentally government issue. And I tend to, I understand the concern. There's not much that the government does better or more efficiently than the private sector. The question is only not even who you trust more, but rather if you trust them or distrust them equally, who would you trust more to do it better? I guess if you distrust them equally, who would you trust better to do it better? Hold on, there was one person who just said something that I wanted to get to.
Yeah, the VA is good.
No,
I have no objection.
What the fuck? You're paying 50% taxes on 100K. Someone else had the same question. Someone said, "Viva, are you actually paying 50%?" Here we go. We're paying. If you are an employee and you get paid $100,000 a year, you're basically paying 45% tax between the federal and the provincial. Now, it's been a long time since I've been on salary, and it's been a long time since I've seen a salary of 100K. If you're independent, you can have your tax benefit. You can have some sort of like deduction. What am I looking for? Tax benefits of expenses and so on and so forth. But if you're on salary, it's 45% at 100K. At 50K, it's maybe 30%. So you're netting 35,000. That's give or take. And I remember this from being a stagiaire. It's we pay a buttload of taxes in Quebec, and we pay them specifically to go. 38% of our provincial budget goes to healthcare, whether you use it or not. And you're healthy and you don't use it, you still pay it. It's more useful than the Oscars. Life, Sandiger. Thank you very much. Life. No question about it.
Yeah, so I just really have grave concerns about our ability to function this. And someone in chat pointed out that Trump has been trying to make reforms to the VA, and he has. And he put in some executive orders dealing with collective bargaining that made it, because the VA had, I'm going to misquote the number no matter what I say, but I want to say it's something like 300 something odd employees who were full-time union. So they had 300 employees paid by taxpayers who didn't actually work in the VA because they were union delegates. And also like the wait times and everything was horrible. And so Trump has been making some inroads, but you will beg my skepticism that those inroads will necessarily last through multiple administrations, or that they would apply in other things. I'm not prepared to give the government control over my healthcare. Now, that being said, I would like things to probably be more unregulated. I do like the price transparency that we have now. It's first step to try to lower costs. So, every hospital has to publish its book prices, its master book prices. It's a start to get things more available. But we probably should get more out of the way rather than getting more in the way. If I had to guess, would be my bet.
Yeah, it's publishing the book prices. So incidentally, two things: free healthcare for us. We have a list of the prices as they're going to be charged to someone who is out of province or out of country, and the costs are just as obscene as they are on the States. It's not like it's Someone subsidizes it at some
So
point.
if you're visiting another province and you like get in a skiing accident, you're hosed.
No, so Medicare. No, I should have said that. Out of province, if you do not have a Medicare card, you have problems. But no, I should have said that. Anywhere in the country, you're pretty good. But anyone who's out of the country or doesn't have a Medicare card, and this was actually one of the nastier lawsuits that I ever dealt with, was a Quebec citizen who had been out of the province for long enough that they lost their Medicare card, came back, had an issue, and then was billed $500,000 by the hospital. And was a legit citizen. It wasn't a question of the citizens. It was, there were some issues, but got billed an a bankrupting amount of money from our free healthcare, because it's got, it comes from somewhere at the end of the day. Let me just, okay, hold on. Jose Gonzalez says, trespassing on anyone's land without permission is a crime, isn't it? Who owns the land at the border, the state along the part of the U.S., the border of the U.S.? I don't know. That's the other thing, is I've never understood when you cross the line, when you're crossing in a car and you get past the fence, but you haven't crossed the border yet. There's that no man's land. I don't know, but
all borders are hypothetically one-dimensional lines with no width. So hypothetically, there's no man's land, and like, you run into this problem even in the U.S. a little bit, because like as you're traveling from state to state, you'll see like signs that say "Welcome to whatever state," and but that sign isn't necessarily like right on the line. So there's technical lines and like where things are. So you could theoretically be in both states. Half your car could be in one and half the car could be in the other, I guess. But yeah, there's a hypothetical one-dimensional line that separates us in Canada. And then there's no touching zone.
All right, I want to answer this one, because this one I have a personal anecdote with. What's wrong with 150 people having the same appointment time? It's free because your time is nothing. So I had recently a procedure, which I will never do again, barring the absolute unforeseeable, which, let's see, I think my audience is majority male, so they might, I don't know if this is more male than female, actually. Rubber band ligation, which I talked about in a couple of videos. It's for hemorrhoids. And okay,
tell me more.
Oh, here's what it is. They go into that spot and they wrap rubber bands. It's like castrating a bull or a lamb in.
That's what it sounds like. Yes.
So you wrap a rubber band around something and it eventually dies and falls off.
Yep.
So I had some issues, and I had this done. Okay. Other than being the most torturous, painful, I don't want to deter anybody from doing it, rubber band. Other than being the most torturous procedure that I've had, and I've had a testicular torsion, I've had a testicular cyst, I've had issues. This was the most painful thing I've ever had, and I believe now I know what it feels like to give birth to a baby. I had to go back for a follow-up. And I couldn't get a follow-up. And I was going through some things that I was beginning to question whether or not these were normal stages of recovery. And then at one point I was lucky to sneak in, and I go to this hospital. I swear to you, it was like out of Jacob's Ladder, this hospital, where like there's 100 people in a room, and it's like nobody's going anywhere. And I waited there for about 3 hours until it finally came to my attention that the doctor who was supposed to see me was not there, because the doctor was in the ER got called in the ER, and the hospital was 45 minutes away from my house. The whole thing, it's wonderful, and didn't cost me a penny. I would have paid to not go through that procedure. So,
you have rubber bands at home, don't you?
Oh dear God! I can't even look at rubber bands anymore. that's how bad it was. But no, it is. It's the grass is always greener thing. We're like, yeah, okay, Bernie Sanders and everybody looks at Canada, says free healthcare. Look at us, Oregon. There's a reason why we have private insurance, and even with that, we end up going to the States to get treatment, because
I mean, there's ultimately no free ride, right? There's no free runs. You're always paying in one way or another. At some point, on some level, it's like you're paying in money, paying in time, paying in, access to care, paying in whatever. And so is the American system the best of all worlds? I'm not going to sit here and claim that. I'm not going to sit here and say the American system is the best of all worlds. There are probably better ways to do it. I have some ideas. If I ever become president, I have some reform ideas. But, do we need to do something different? Probably. I don't know exactly what that should be. It's It's a huge, massive problem. But is government takeover of healthcare is a one payer the solution? I have my doubts. I'm not sure I trust the government with that much power, just in principle. And there's that too. It's like I'm always skeptical of government power. Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the question. Like, why would the government be better at it than private enterprise? I don't trust private enterprise. It's just one. They are accountable to different sort of.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them, and they can do a lot less damage in aggregate. I mean, as big as the healthcare companies are, they are not as big as the government. So
I got to answer this one. The Wolf of the North says, Viva Frei, how many manly issues do you have? I will not answer that question except to say that I have had my 3 children. So whatever more manly problems I have, I've done what I was put on this earth to do. I'm not even sure I should say this. Whatever. At one point, I've had a testicular torsion, which twice. Yeah. And
how? You didn't learn the first time?
No, the first. I don't even know how it happened twice, because the second time the surgery effectively eliminated the possibility of it ever happening again.
There's only one way for that to be true.
No, because they didn't remove. No. I have 2. What they did was they sew one of them to the TMI part of this. They sew one of them to the inside of the sac so that it can no longer crisscross around the other. I think the first time, I don't know what they did, but everything's good. Got 3 kids. Don't need any more. One person, they got Viva Frei. Deuce Go Tech LX says, Viva Frei, I work in a skilled trade and pay 24% federal income tax, 17% provincial, 15% sales tax. There's plenty of service fees that I'm not accounting for, almost 60%. Deuce, totally acknowledge. I would take out the 15% sales tax because everybody pays that. And that's not sort of income tax, but although it's income tax, but that's 24, 17. What's my problem? That's 41. What am my problem? That's 30. That's 41%. Not asking what your salary is, but I know it goes up by scales. We pay a tremendous amount of tax in Canada. It's obscene. And that's, forget the 15% sales tax, school tax, property tax, luxury car tax. So I've got a Ford Explorer. I got dinged on a luxury car tax in Quebec.
Ford Explorer counts as luxury?
Dude, I don't even know. I got the 4-wheel drive one. No, I'm joking.
I would presume that would be helpful in Canada.
No, they're all 4-wheel drive. It's a joke. It's a joke. We're going with a Subaru for our next car. But
I like Subaru a lot. I've never owned one, but they're great cars.
The 4-wheel drive is through the.
Oh yeah, no, the 4-wheel drive system. I could talk about this too because I do like cars. The 4-wheel drive system on Subaru, the only one that can come close is Audi, because they both have outstanding 4-wheel drive systems. So like this, the symmetrical all-wheel drive and the boxer engine that the Subarus have, really, really cool design. They're reliable. They last a long time. They're
affordable. It's not
affordable.
So someone says, Ray says, I'm about to be sick, but it's still better than the Oscars. I take for granted you're either talking about my testicular problems or
that's what I'm going with.
The taxation problems.
Either way, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have a story that will make everyone sick, but I can't even do it. I can't even do it now. We'll do it later. Ford Explorer luxury, and not just that. It's a company car, and then I have to pay a special registration for company car, which is $300 a year. So it's just like, I wanted to do a video one day just on the amount of taxes we end up paying, because it's just left, right, and center, and it never ends. I mean, literally, income tax, sales tax, property tax, school tax. Then you have your car. You have your sorry, what was I looking for? Luxury car tax, the registration for your license plate. If you get a custom light, it never ends.
Did you pay property tax on the car?
No, luckily, and the good thing is we don't have
Virginia. We do.
Oh my!
We pay property tax on the car. It's like paying sales tax every year. Yeah.
No, it's called a fee. It's not called a tax anymore. Can you please tell me what's going on in Virginia?
Yes.
The Second Amendment.
I'm a Virginian.
Okay, dude, you go for this one because this might be a good subject to end it on. I don't know. Okay, I know about what was going on, but not enough. Kurt, do it.
Well, which part of what do we want to talk about? The protests, the Second Amendment issues, there's recall missions and laws about changing public officials. Yeah. So, I mean, no surprise there. Of course, they want to put these in while they have power to prevent them from being subject to the systems that would deal with them. If you want to talk about the Second Amendment issues in Virginia, I am your guy. I am an executive member of VCDL, which is the group that set up the rally in Virginia. I've gone to that rally 8 of the last 10 years. I can tell you anything you want to know.
The acronym you just said is
VCDL? Virginia Citizens Defense League is what it's called.
Now I feel like
I can tell you anything you want to know. I'm your expert.
So first of all, am I now going to get in trouble with YouTube for even being? What is the Virginia
Citizens Defense League? It's a pro-gun group. It's not a militia, so you can stop panicking.
Ooh, okay, let's go on then.
Yeah, it's a pro-gun lobbying group. That's what they do. They are not a militia. They're most certainly not racial superior in any way. They don't believe in that kind of thing. But they are a pro-gun group, and every year they go to Richmond on Martin Luther King Day, which has traditionally become Lobby Day, because again, every state does things a little bit differently in terms of their state legislature. What Virginia does is they have like a 3-month session, and so they meet from the first week of January through like March, and then they're done. So, anyways, that second Monday is always Martin Luther King Day, and it's a federal holiday, so a lot of people have the day off. So it's traditionally become known as Lobby Day in Virginia, and everyone goes down there to lobby for everything. So I've, in past years, seen people lobbying for the environment, people lobbying for motorcycle helmet laws, people lobbying for schools and all kinds of stuff, right? So this is traditionally what it's been, just a day because a lot of people have it off, because especially Northern Virginia is a lot of federal workers, and so they go down there and do that. And basically, that was what happened this year too, except 30 to 50,000 people showed up, and not all of them were VCDL, and they were filling the streets and having the same rallies that they always do. So they always do the rally at the bell tower. They always have various speakers that are there, and they usually have members of the state legislature that are there to speak on Second Amendment issues. It's always peaceful. It's always just I've led groups before. And I've gone up and down the legislature building, because there's a building where their offices are. And I've taken groups up and down those stairs years after years, visiting our legislature. And we hand them a packet that's been pre-prepared. And we talk to people that have, that are our delegates, our representatives. And we say, we want you to support this, this, and this. It's always very cordial, always very peaceful. We do it every year. And I'm assuming that's what happened this year. So, yeah. And there was a huge pro-gun rally this year, because the threat to gun rights is so much bigger. I mean, in a typical year for VCDL, we typically would have somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people, probably. So we normally get good attendance, but this year it was like 20 to 50,000. It was a lot of people.
Something you said which struck me, and I'm still thinking about it. You said, we are not a militia.
We're definitely not. No.
Hey, hold on. I don't even know what that means, but you're not a militia. You're what? Versus not a militia, like how does that work?
Okay, someone said
alternative to a militia, I guess.
Yeah, no worries. First of all, someone in chat said they thought I was in Texas. I'm on my way to Texas. I'll be in Texas next month, but I'm still a Virginia resident. Anyway,
okay, hold on. Before we do that, someone says, ask him if he's been back since they tore down the old Gab.
No, I don't know what that is. What's the General Assembly building? No, I haven't been there since they tore down the General Assembly building. No.
Okay.
Because they were moving their offices from one place to another. But by militia, what I mean is a group of people who are, dressing up in camo and regularly meeting and regularly shooting firearms and grouping together with the idea of eventually overthrowing the state, or some aspirations there too. That's what I mean by militia.
Okay, and I'm going to ask a totally ignorant question as
no problem.
Is a militia a formal term? Like I want to say something so stupid. Is it a recognized term, or is it an informal term for a grouping of people?
Well, technically it's a formal term, but the way everyone uses it is as an informal term. Okay. So if you hear the word militia, you're talking about an informal group. It's an informal group that are together to practice shooting and planning, violent overthrow of various governments. VCDL does not do that.
There is no such thing as registering as a militia for the purposes of tax credits or something.
No, I'm sure not. That would be hilarious if someone tried.
You don't have your not-for-profit organizations and your militia organizations that you can ask for recognition from the government.
Yeah, and I someone was pointing out that like Michigan has a militia. So yes. So let me try to be 100% clear. There is a formal militia that formally exist even in United States law. There's formal militias that exist in state laws as well. So a lot of times they're called state guard as opposed to National Guard. So you might have heard of the National Guard in various recruitments, but there's also the state guard, which is run exclusively by the governor. And Virginia has this as well, which you might call a militia. And so there's that formal militia, the state guard, National Guard thing. And then there's the informal militia of a bunch of rednecks who get together and do stuff. So either interpretation of the word militia, VCDL is neither of those things. So
okay, we got
program group.
In the Act says every state has militia to protect their state or government.
Noted. That's what I was just trying to say.
Okay, interesting. And then we said good, decent patriotic gun folk. I mean, that's okay. The gun discussion is something else for another day, given the Canadian state of the law on this. So, okay, so you now are a member of this for whatever the reason. This year, instead of 500 to 1,000 people coming down for what is typically an annual day of protest or day of
lobbying,
lobby, how many came down this year?
Oh, well, the estimates were 20 to 50,000.
And why?
Because the Democrats took over the state legislature, both houses and they own then they have the governorship. So it's the first time in like 30 years that the Democrats have had all three of the state government. They've had the state house, state senate, and state governor at the same time.
Which basically means they can pass whatever laws they want. Which
so the gun folks are extremely concerned that the state will be proposing and enacting regulations that will be a detriment to gun rights as gun rights supporters perceive them. And my own delegate is against me. My own delegate, because I'm still a Virginia domicile, I'm still a Virginia voter until I become a Texas voter next month. But my own delegate is Mark Levine. He's the guy who proposed the assault weapons ban in the Virginia. This is Virginia law, not national law. But he's the state minority leader or state minority whip. And he's the guy who proposed the assault weapons ban. That's my representative. Okay. So we've met a couple times. So yeah, I know he's the one who wants to like ban certain firearms and ban things, make everything assault weapons and prevent people from having more than 10 round magazines and so forth and so on. So my representative hates me, but that's okay. We've talked. Okay,
so now so I think the bigger issue is setting it. Well, I say bigger. It depends on your perspective. Above and beyond the gun issues or the gun laws, Democrats now control all three elements of the legislature
and the governor. Yeah.
And so this now makes me understand something else that I was reading, which was laws regarding not criticizing the government or rules regarding online discourse, which were also of which were also of interest in the news.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
So that now, okay, that's interesting. So now 23,000, it's like 20 to 50,000 people show up with guns.
Yeah.
And nothing happens, and it's left better than it was when it started.
Yeah. That's that they picked up the streets and everything. My understanding is one person was arrested for refusing to take off a mask because a lot of southern states in particular have laws about wearing masks because of the KKK. So there was one person who, despite being repeatedly asked, refused to take it off, and so there was one arrest for that.
Okay, and but
otherwise it was completely peaceful. And normally, in normal years, as I say, it's a lot of different groups, but I got the distinct impression that it was just the pro-gun groups this time because, kind of dominated the field this one.
Okay, and we got John says the purpose of the militias is preparation for standby. Very few plot to overthrow the government. Don't dare lump the majority of us into some unruly anti-government mob. That's when you describe the militia, because we have something here in Canada called I don't even want to make a mistake by mischaracterizing, but when you have like your state unofficial or what's the word I'm looking for? Defenders, but not what was the word used previously, but not militia, but rather on a state level.
Oh, the state guard?
State guard. Okay. Sure. I think we have something along those lines in Canada, which are not recognized as RCMP or police officers, but are recognized to some extent. So calling it the state guard might have a more palatable taste than militia to most people. But so the question is, the militia is being I mean, I've heard that word and I saw it on The Simpsons, and like I know I just don't understand how it materializes in real life in the
Yeah,
States.
I mean, John's point is well taken. I mean, there are some militias that are more like just kind of preppers and just kind of prepping and not necessarily, doing anything in terms of overthrow, but they're just prepping for some sort of disaster, whether that be natural or otherwise, which isn't necessarily a bad idea because, let's look at New Orleans when Katrina hit, for example. The government may not necessarily be there. So, but they're on a spectrum. But yeah, it's usually a group of people that are coming together to prep / overthrow / whatever. So it's on a spectrum of people, but VCDL is still none of those things.
Okay, now if I may ask I'm going to ask an obvious question: are the militias at any point in the state federal law recognized as terrorist organizations? Are they labeled as such? Are they regarded as such? Or are they sort of clubs?
I mean, some might be. I couldn't really speak to that, but I imagine that there are some groups that are on watch lists or designated as such. But I mean, I don't necessarily know. But certainly not all of them are. I mean, not all of them would be, domestic terrorist threats. But there's definitely some contingent who fall into that category. I mean, and that was what that I can't remember the Texas what Texas ATF raid was all about, back in the day.
Oh,
Anyway.
I can't remember it either.
Yeah, that guy. So
Okay.
that was a lot of that.
Because someone give us the name of who we're thinking about right now, because I can't. It's going to drive me. It's going to bother me if I can't get it. Waco.
Yes, Waco. Yes, well, that was the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you disagree with national registration law from Dapper Dave?
I do. Yeah, I do.
National registration law means what?
Well, in the United States, you don't have to register firearms, at least on federal law. Some cities require it, and I think probably some states do. But like none of my firearms are registered with anybody. They're not registered because they don't have to be.
And the idea, so I guess now just to fill in the blanks here, the idea of registration would be you register them with the government. Some government agency knows you have them, which ones you have, where you live, how to contact you, and how to find you.
Yeah, all that good stuff. And the concern there is twofold. First, as they make guns illegal, like they'll know that if I don't turn it in, then like I still have it. So it's confiscation, either one way or another. And like if they ever want to confiscate just all the guns, they know where to go. And wasn't it New York State? I want to say it was New York State that made the really idiotic move of publishing its list of registrations, made it public information, and someone produced a map.
I think so. I don't
registrations, and then people started robbing those homes for the guns they knew were there. Wasn't that New York who did that stupid thing?
I think it was I want to say San Francisco or San Diego, somewhere out west is where I most recently recall that list being disclosed to.
Yeah, so we're worried about these things. Yes, we're worried about it ultimately becoming a confiscation issue. Yeah. We're worried about we're worried about us registering and then saying, great, now we want those guns back. So that's a problem. So we don't have a registration system in the United States. So yeah,
it's such an amazing. Cause this is where I took the firearm safety course in Canada, and I learned all we went over this, and I understood for the first time the dynamic between the states and the rest of the world, which is the Second Amendment versus gun control in the rest of the world. And the idea is like, okay, just register, let somebody know what you have and where you live. And it's an amazing thing. It's like when you walk in, even in Canada, you walk into a gun shop with all the registration, you buy something, the gun store owner knows who you are, what you have, where you live. Anybody who breaks in knows who you are, what you have, where you live. Law enforcement, and it's an amazing thing. It's like, and I think of it only in the thing that is practical to me is drones. Like when we had to start registering our drones. Okay, it's great. And then one day they say, okay, well, drones are illegal now. There's no minimum weight limit for drones. Nobody's allowed having them. We know you have them, Viva Frei, because you did the stupid online internet test and you registered your drone with us. We have your serial number, your home address. We know where to come and get you. And it's an amazing thing is that what is right, what is not law today is law tomorrow, and then the consequences that flow from that, which it may not change the way you feel on the subject at all, but it opens your eyes to it nonetheless.
I mean, at least from my viewpoint, I think the gun problem in the United States is at least somewhat overblown. I mean, and these numbers may be shocking or not, depending on your point of view. But we have 30,000 give or take firearms deaths, but 2/3 of those are suicide, and of the remaining 10,000 or so, a lot of those is gang violence related to drugs. So, like, the idea of like these mass shootings is not as prevalent as the news would have you believe. And so, especially when you look at the drop of the violent crime rate over the last 30 years or so, and it's been dropped by half, it's like, what is the scale of the problem versus what restrictions on liberty would we have to give to solve that problem? So it becomes like many things, a cost benefit analysis. And of course, that cost benefit analysis is informed by the Second Amendment as well, because of that constitutional right issue as well, which I'm very loyal to. But, I think the news somewhat inflates the concern vis-a-vis the numbers, at least as far as I'm concerned.
That's very interesting. I mean, for most people who are not necessarily deep diving involved in this would know of the rough breakdown of the 30 some odd thousand, 33, 35,000, 2/3 are suicide, and then you break down the rest however political orientation dictates. John O'Brien says, I agree entirely with the other guy. Under DC versus Heller, the militia is not an organized group. Under law, it is all individuals capable of defending the states. There is some odd conflation here.
Well, I think the term militia is used in many different ways, and so I was speaking to like how most people are using the term broadly. But like, you're right that because there's this whole second, I'm very familiar with DC versus Heller. I've met Heller many times. Nice guy. But yeah, the issue in Heller was that the Second Amendment says that there's the right of the militia and then the right of the people. And so they say the militia are the people are the militia, that idea. And it's also backed by federal law, because there's in definition of the militia in federal law, it talks about the organized militia and unorganized militia. And the unorganized militia is like every male between the ages of 18 and 50 or something. So there's like that issue too. So there's many different frames of the word militia. So when DC versus Heller was talking about the militia, they were talking about it in one sense, which is not an untrue sense. But when Viva was asking me like, what is the militia, I was trying to give him what I perceive to be the broad, what most people would be used for. I mean, it's available in technical senses that you're talking about. I don't deny that, but I was trying to give him the most common use of the word.
Yeah, and just so it was, I'm not holding Kurt to any sort of strict definition of what he gave. It was for my own benefit. So it seems to have triggered a sub.
Yeah, we're having a debate now. The gun rights people are holding my feet to the fire, because they're not happy that I was not being as precision as they would like me to. But I could give you like the 10 definitions, but
don't forget, because this we've now taken not to say a tangent. We've veered into. I've never thought we would get here. In fact, I've never even thought I'd be discussing this on the internet. So it might be something actually to carry on in the next in another dedicated live chat, because this gets into a number of questions and issues that I've been long wanting to get into. So we might have to put it on pause for a little while. PSN Guide says, being from Oklahoma City, OKC, Oklahoma City.
Yeah, you got it.
Uncivil Law was referring to Timothy McVeigh. There we go. Timothy.
Yeah,
McVeigh.
that too.
Okay.
But I was thinking of Koresh, but yeah, same idea.
David Koresh from
Waco.
That's something I have to revisit now, having the level of knowledge that I have now about American issues. Like, that's one thing. Yeah. I remember it happening as a kid. No appreciation for what was going on.
Yeah, so that's the most extreme version of that. I think there is a lot of legitimate criticism in the chat, at least, that not all militias are like that. A lot of them are just more preppers preparing for, whatever emergencies may be, and not all of them with a desire to necessarily overthrow anything. So, but it's on a continuum like many things. So fair enough.
And we got Viva. What about the information? What about the information about 3D printing of firearms? Is that
oh my god? I could talk about this one. I love that too. Oh my god.
Do we? Okay, we may need to end this one in 7 minutes. Can we do this in 7 minutes and end it on this topic, or is it too much?
All right, so let's give a quick primer on this issue. So, 3D printing of firearms. It was a defense distributed. I think they're a Texas-based group. was publishing CAD files, computer assisted design files for how to build guns or parts of guns. And that case is still ongoing as far as I'm aware, because they reached a settlement finally with the federal government, but I think some states are after them because there was dealing with export laws and exports of munitions and ITAR, which is international, dealing with international regulation of transfer of munitions. But yeah, basically they were trying to prevent Defense Distributed and others from sharing these CAD files on how to make 3D printed firearms or components thereof. Personally, I think it's more a First Amendment issue than a Second Amendment issue, although you can fold it into either, because what we're literally talking about is ones and zeros on a computer disk, because it's a computer assisted design file. Tells you and tells the 3D printer how to make the thing by, going up and putting this down here and all the rest of it. So I think it's a First Amendment issue, but yeah, it's really complicated, deals with, I can talk a little bit about this. Cody Williams was the guy who ran it. Got into trouble with the government. Someone else is now running it. He was a hardcore libertarian guy, and it was a whole huge mess. So I know quite a bit about the Defense Distributed 3D printing cases and all that good stuff. Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's an interesting story.
And so
it's definitely a First Amendment issue.
Okay, and we'll pass the buck onto you and to your channel. Talk about it on your channel, and people will come to watch it, because I don't think we have the time or the bandwidth to deal with this right now. It's it's interesting. And in Canada, what's the threshold in the United States for something becoming a firearm?
Okay, the firearm is the action of the firearm. So it's the it's not the barrel. It's the part that receives it. And for that reason, for ARs, for example, they sell these things which are called 80% lowers because they're 80% finished, which doesn't count as a firearm. So basically, it's anything more than 80% complete of the lower receiver of a firearm. That's the firearm. Was that helpful? That was a very technical definition.
Okay, so in Canada, our laws deem something to be a firearm if it projects a projectile at more than 500 feet per second, which is why BB guns, like high-powered BB guns that you use to hunt rabbit and whatever small game that shoot faster than 500 feet per second, are classified as weapons that you need to get a license for to own. Under that, you don't have to get a license. And now I'm going to say, John, you slipped up. You plainly expressed your believed view of militias. Just own it. John?
Hey, you guys, you're killing me a little bit here, man.
You're
killing me a little bit. All right. I try. Viva asked me a question. I'm trying to say this is the sense that I believe what I said was something along the lines of, this is the sense that most people are using the term in. This is the sense that it's this group of people are getting together to overthrow the government. And I still stand by that's probably the sense that most people are using the term in. So I think what I said is accurate. It's still accurate, but yes, there are many different versions of the term militia. There's the federal law. There's the 1791 Militia Act, which deals with unorganized militia, organized militia, state things. There's other groups. So yes, all right. Okay, you guys are killing me a little bit, I have to say. All right,
Yeah.
Kill me a little bit.
You are also a wealth of knowledge, Kurt, and it's very interesting. But 500 feet per second, that really ain't shit. It's no joke, by the way. It's if you want, but this is the kicker. If you want to legally hunt small game with a BB gun, you can't but hunt with a gun that shoots with a projectile that shoots 500 feet per second or more. So if you want to hunt for rabbit, like with a single pellet gun, you cannot legally do it unless it shoots faster than 500 feet per second. In which case, you need to register it.
Chat's being overrun by bots right now, Viva. You're lucky, man. You got the sex bots going on now.
What's going on here? I haven't.
You got some bots. Yeah, you got the bot. You got the bot raid. You got the bot raid, man.
Well, I'm not bringing that one up. I think this video is getting demonetized regardless.
Yeah. Why would it be demonetized? We were only enjoying a little bit of liberation and talking about firearms and talking about laws related to it, and
they're going to put together the words testicles, hernia. Don't bounce on the host's yeesh, the John Beck. Yeah, don't no. Kurt's a big boy. We're good here. But
I'm a big Second Amendment supporter, guys. I love firearms. I'm a huge Second Amendment guy. So it's like, you got to give me a little bit of a break here, guys. Please. Jeez.
This guy's cheap pellet gun goes 1,300 feet per second. That's crazy. Okay. All right, good. We're gonna call it now. It's 11:30. We've only been going.
Hey, that's I support. Bring Uncivil Law back. Yeah, we should.
Dude, I'll do this as often as I'll do this as. I've got a nice repertoire now of.
You were about to say you were going to do it as often as.
Oh no, I'll do it as often as we can. But the thing is, I can't do live streams too often because I still got to do the vlogs and then the other thing is we're getting a nice repertoire network of YouTube lawyers to do.
Yes, we are. Which I'm very pleased with.
Subject. Okay, so I want to bring up some of these comments, but I can't. Okay, hold on a second.
Because they're not appropriate.
Super chats I'm required.
Well, if we've already been demonetized, man, go for broke.
I can't. I'm trying. I don't want to break the internet right now. PSN guy says, I say 50% libs, views, militias like you described. Okay. No.
Sure.
Okay, look, I'm gonna do it. Hey, Viva.
No. This isn't a real chat. This person, it's a bot that's automatically quoting someone else. So the way these bots work is the way this bot works is it scans the chat and it automatically quotes other people. So that bot never actually said that.
Someone says,
so you got fooled. You got fooled because you don't know how this bot works. Bad Viva.
Or did I know exactly what was going on and did it nonetheless? Okay, good. All right, Kurt. Let's do it. 11:30 at night. I'm going to go to bed. I'm not even going to pretend I'm watching the Oscars for what's left.
Well, with that, I will just post my link to my channel in there. So,
Uncivil Law, Kurt.
Yes.
Please. What is? I know another name for you on the internet, and I don't know why.
Blackleaf.
Yeah, why?
It's an old D&D reference. It's a Dungeons and Dragons reference.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it's a Dungeons and Dragons reference. Do you know Dungeons and Dragons? Do you know the game?
I know it based on I've never played it a day in my life.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's a Dungeons and Dragons though. There was these things called chick tracks back in the day, and they still exist with these little testimonial things on believing in God and believing in Jesus. And one of these was called Dark Dungeons. It was a chick track because the guy's name is Chick. His name is Jack Chick. That's why they're called chick tracks. And so it's called Dark Dungeons. And in the book, in this little pamphlet, one of the characters in there creates a D&D character whose name is Blackleaf. And then the character dies, and then in the thing, the person actually kills themselves because Blackleaf died, and then the other person comes to Jesus because of the whole thing. So I named myself Blackleaf because of a character in a Jack Trick track from the 80s. Okay. So that's what I use as an alias on the internet is Blackleaf. That's where it comes from. It's a very old D&D joke.
I'm sure somebody must have gotten it. You guys might even bring up the reputations of lawyers. You need a mod. I'll look into a mod. I'm not sure I like it now. Dirk on there that I'm bringing up Dirk because I know Dirk is not a bot. I am not a bot. Yeah. I've seen Dirk.
And I when I play D&D, I always name my character Blackleaf every time. And most of the time they don't get the joke, but it's okay. And I usually play a rogue, but yeah, that's how I roll. I like D&D. It's a good game.
God, now I was gonna bring up the same bot again. Okay. You got Cindy Axe says, let me see here. Thank you, all fun in here. No, this was good. This was very nice. Okay, I can't even. I'm just reading the chat now. Forget it. Kurt, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you very much for coming. We'll do this again. 100% we're doing this again. We'll pick another topic and we'll work out the format. I'm juggling between doing these long ranting sort of meandering.
I love it. I love it
too. It's just a question of whether or not people would prefer this versus 1 hour hard on a subject.
Without this, they don't get as much as me, and that's the really important thing in this.
Get Uncivil Law. All right, Kurt, thank you very much. Stick around. We'll talk afterwards. Wait, I just come up here. Dude XO1 says, Viva, if you are ever in New York, I will run a dungeon and can teach you. All right. I may take you up on it, but thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, Kurt, stick around. We'll talk a bit afterwards. Everyone, thank you very much. And we are ending it now with my thumb over the screen. Peace out.